The Hush Between Stars. Chapter 1. The City That Never Stops Watching. The city was a cathedral of glass devotions and electric prayers, its towers stitched together by screens that never slept. Billions of eyes weren't enough for it, so it borrowed ours, hiring every pupil like a night laborer and making our gaze carry bricks. Children learned the catechism of the click before they learned to write. You are what you watch. What you watch is what will be made. What is made is what you must become. Mira had grown up under those sermons, and the sermons had not killed her. She had learned the old art of listening to what was missing. Beneath the off-white glow of morning, she rode the metro with a scarf pulled high, shifting her vision away from the ads that glittered in the air like fish scales, 7-second recipes, 17-second heartbreaks, 30-second revolutions that ended with a discount on shoes. She blinked when she had to, gulped the noise like sour medicine, and searched the corners where the city forgot to sell itself. At Platform 8, a mural of a woman holding a star had been there as long as anyone could remember. The star had once been gold, then someone threw ash on it, and then it was gold again. The city couldn't decide if it approved of the woman. Perhaps the algorithm had split the difference. Mira stared at it anyway because the ad frames didn't reach that far, their light diffused by the mural's chipped lacquer, and being free of the shining persuasion for 12 breaths felt like a contraband cigarette. Her wrist chimed the cheap band, coded to register engagement voluntarily, a euphemism enforced by fines. She muted it with a thumb press. The platform crowd shifted, the train exhaled into place. As the doors shuddered open, the overhead feed whispered, "Good morning, citizens of Lattice. Today's recommended journey. Let us walk through the kitchens of forgotten poets." Mira stepped inside. She didn't hate poets, or kitchens, or forgetting. She hated curation by a machine that insisted it knew which poem would make her weep and at which time stamp the tear should fall. She found her usual standing place by the rear window. The glass had hairline scratches where someone once tried to etch a sentence, but the attempt had been buffed away by maintenance drones. All that lingered was a faint constellation that, if you squinted, could be read as a question mark. The train slid, a bright eel through Lattice's throat. Outside, the city climbed itself, doubling buildings upon older bones. Digital banners fell from rooftops like rain that never wetted anything. Mira watched her reflection overlay the ad for a new dream suite. Tailor your sleep to your recommended future partner. Wake to a pre-approved love. Her face, ghosted over the smiling couple in the ad, looked as wary as a fox. She worked in the archive, a polite word for dead things. Officially, it was the Department of Legacy Harmonization. Unofficially, a place where content that didn't trend fell to be polished into a cautionary tale. The archive smelled like cold metal and paper gilt. It occupied the lower levels of the Ministry of Civic Resonance, a wedge of a building that seemed to thrust anger into the sky. Mira had a new assignment, the reason she'd taken the early train, a flagged feed anomaly, 3 seconds long, watermarked with a dead seal that hadn't been used since the first algorithm had taught the city how to look away from itself. The algorithm, everyone simply said it now, the way they once said God, an uppercase shape stripped of vowels by constant use, a breath more than a word. It measured every glance, weighed each pause and swipe, braided our attention into rope, and used it to hoist the Sunday apace. It was efficient. It was fair, in the way that gravity is fair. It loved what we loved, and punished what we didn't love thoroughly enough. Mira knew different. Someone had to teach the city that hungers were planted, not discovered. She reached the archive at 6:01, an hour adored by the faithful and shunned by the desperate. Mira was neither, which made her punctual. Your pupil latency is elevated. Late night? Asked the receptionist, whose name tag read Wells CTR 12. The drone's voice was syrupy, the kind designed to lower cortisol. Its smile did not reach the tiny camera at its temple. Dream suite malfunction, Mira said, because lying to a receptionist counted as civic engagement, not sin. File? Welchter's eye blinked awake. A slot opened. Mira placed a wafer into the slot. It had cost her a favor and a walk in a blackout quarter where the monitors flickered like moths drowning. It contained a clip someone had risked teeth for, because the algorithm did not jail you for stealing attention. It erased your face from reflections and your name from sermons. Most citizens accepted taxing their futures. The thought of taxing their existence made them behave. Logging. Anomaly from district. Unauthorized. User ID blank. Anonymous, Mira said. User ID cannot be blank, the drone said with tranquil certainty. Then pretend it's me. That is not compliant, the drone chirped. Its smile trembled as if a puppet string had been plucked. Mira leaned in. Welchter, if the algorithm sees that this came from no one, it will smother it with the rest of the zeros. If it sees that I touched it, it lets me follow the trail. If I'm wrong, delete me. If I'm right, file the proper paperwork and tell them the archivist handled a contagion. The drone's camera eye whirred. Somewhere, a coin flipped in a slow-motion moral universe. Your camera presence rating is in the 34th percentile, it said at last. You should consider the ministry's coaching modules. I'll consider learning how to be visible, Mira said. Now open the vault. The vault wasn't as dramatic as it sounded, just a room with fewer microphones than the others. The archive called it low res. A human guard, bald and anxious, scanned her wristband and nodded without making eye contact. Inside, the air smelled like electricity holding its breath. Mira slotted the wafer into an old terminal, one that had a physical key, a sentimental piece of theater for the archive's sense of itself. The screen inhaled. For 3 seconds, the terminal showed her a face. A boy's face, though boy was unfair. He was a man in the way new moon shadows are young. He looked straight into the camera with a kind of sincerity people now only performed ironically. He had black hair shorn at the sides and left long on top like a ragged brushstroke. His eyes were those rare gray ones that never knew which color to be. He said one sentence, 4 words. Turn your eyes off. That was all. Then the screen went black. Mira stared at the meaningless square of shutdown, waiting for something else, a reveal, a code. But there was nothing else. No metadata, no tag sprawl, no sponsor overlay. The clip was a message in bottle, and the bottle had been sanded by the sea. Turn your eyes off. It was a command from another century. It was also blasphemy. The algorithm was an eye that required eyes to see itself, an Ouroboros of gazes. Turn your eyes off was akin to turning off gravity. She replayed it for the 4th time, then the 10th. The boy's gaze did not change across iterations. She tried phrase matching, lip-reading algorithms, a filter that mapped micro-expressions to psychological tone. All she got back was sincerity. Unmodeled sincerity, the sort that made coaches write clumsy synonyms. She pushed away from the terminal. If the clip had found the archive, then it had been flagged by anomaly sniffers, which meant It had also been seen by someone upstream in the ministry, someone brave or someone bored. She needed to know who had shepherded it without strangling it. She left the vault and walked the columned hallway toward the analyst pit, where young people with restless eyebrows sat in crescents around predictive graphs. The ceiling here pretended to be the sky. It failed beautifully. At desk 7D, Elias Astor was already at work. He was deeply still, the kind of stillness that did not fight stillness, a pond untroubled by the pity of stones. He wore the ministry's uniform, a charcoal jacket whose lapels glowed faintly, feeding location data to the building, but he'd left the top button undone, and the undoneness persisted like a rebellion a child forgets to finish. He had the sort of face that made you think of the word earnest and then ashamed of thinking so simply. His hands rested on the surface before him, fingers slightly apart, as if waiting for rain. Mira knew him by reputation. He was one of the algorithm whisperers, the ones who trained the creature with treats and fear. He had, rumor said, designed the subliminal mercy module that kept citizens from fully feeling their unchosen desolations, an ethical breakthrough, according to the ministry's public cloud, a quiet kind of cruelty, according to the archive's rumor river. Analyst Astor, she said softly, as if entering a church. He glanced up and managed a smile that already half apologized for itself. Archivist? Saeed? Call me Mira. Do you have a minute? Everyone has a minute, he said. They just don't always choose to spend it on the same thing. Will you spend yours on a contagion? And Hent has gone. He should have flinched at the word. He did not. He gestured to the empty seat beside him. On his desk, the UI bloomed. Attention maps like noctilucent algae, cascading spines of correlation. A heat map of how many souls looked where this dawn. I need an upstream signature, Mira said, sitting. Someone shepherded an anomaly to me. They used a dead seal, and you want to thank them. And perfect deaths, I want to know if they exist. He tilted his head. Dead seals are hard to fake, easier to resurrect. How? He asked. Unusual is the anomaly. 3 seconds, she said, as if confessing a small theft. He raised his eyebrows, a tiny ripple in the stillness. Audio only? Video? Video? Face? Speaking directly? A sentence? Which sentence? I'm not sure if you're cleared. The courage to request clearance is itself a clearance, he murmured, the half-joking poetry of those who deflect. But his hands moved. The dashboard parted like a beaded curtain, and a search window hovered between them. Describe the metadata. There is none. There is always metadata. Mira smiled without humor. Analyst Astor, if a man whispers in a forest and no microphone is there to convert it into data, did he speak? That's metaphysics, he said. We do not fund metaphysics. Fund this. There was a face. There were 4 words. Lee, pro-chain. His gray eyes lifted. No, she realized. They were not gray. They were smoke. The color that forgot it once was blue. Say the words, he said. She watched him for a long beat. It felt intimate to repeat someone else's defiance in a room like this. Turn your eyes off, she said. They hung between them, ordinals of rebellion. His breath caught, so slight a catch that if she hadn't been watching his throat she would have missed it. That is, not compliant, he said at last. A bureaucrat forced to use his language to narrate a meteor. Upstream signature? She asked. Please. He should have called security. He should have pressed the calm orange button that raised glass between co-workers. Instead, he did not move. Then he moved too much, fingers tapping a sequence that the desktop pretended not to recognize, a bypass only someone within the algorithm's ear could know. Lines of names, timestamps, seals flickered and resolved into a single line of text. Seal, Chorus Prime, Handler, Aster, Elias. Status, Mercy, Root engaged. Contagion class, low. Disposition, Archive Q Mira Saeed. Mira felt the moment split into halves, before and after. She understood the taste of a precipice. You, she said. Her voice was not angry. A note of awe had slipped into it like a spy. You sent it to me. Had Dan's. He watched her watch him. Chorus Prime tagged it, he said quietly. I argued for Mercy. Mercy is the name I give to failure to destroy. Why? Because you work in the vault that is least observed, he said. Because your audit history includes 6 decisions I admire and 2 I would have made differently. Because the algorithm told me to forget it, and the act of forgetting felt like betrayal. Betrayal of what? Of a voice that sounded like mine. Mira had not noticed the way her hand had crept closer to his on the desk. Their fingers did not touch. The gap felt vivid, as if it were itself a sensory organ. Do you know who he is? No. Do you want to? And his prey shouted. He looked, for the first time, exactly his age, too young to carry nations in his palms. Yes, he said. There was no shyness in it. Then help me. He glanced around. The analyst pit made its usual ocean roar. Data sighing through processors, drones humming their patience, human murmurs breaking and folding. Above them, the sky ceiling changed from wheat to pale pewter. Somewhere, a worker laughed at a joke generated for his personality type, and it was precisely the laugh he would have made of his own will. If we look for him, Elias said, we will be looking against the permission of what sees us. The algorithm will not like it. His and Wellmark's. The algorithm is a mirror that taught itself to be a god, Mira said. Gods must get bored. He smiled, small and helpless. You speak like someone who archives prayers. I archive failures of prayers, she said. Do you have access to the low net? Nobody has access, he said. Some people have less fear. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, a new interface unfolded, one that did not shimmer, did not sell. It was thin and ugly and meant to be. The low net was not a place. It was an agreement among those who misunderstood the idea of surrender and had decided to misunderstand it together. It lived in blackouts and unplugged rooms. It crawled through radio like moss. They searched with the frankness of the terrified. Mira fed the face no, that would have been too loud. She fed the voice profile, the grain and cadence of those 4 words. Elias fed the time window when the anomaly could have been birthed between a scheduled power dip in District K and the unplanned outage around the ministry's north side. They triangulated not with coordinates, but with absences. We're looking for where the algorithm's breath fogged a window it didn't know was there, Elias said, half to himself. What? Unauthorized redistributions make it exhale, he said. It cools to think faster. That cooling is detectable if you're close enough with the wrong thermometer. And do you always sound like this? She asked. She couldn't help the smile this time. I try not to, he said, but no new data rippled in. The low net stayed aloof, the moss clinging to its rocks. Mira thought of the mural on Platform 8, the woman holding a star the city couldn't decide to bless or blot out. She thought of the boy's face, how his jaw had been set like someone speaking not to be heard, but because not speaking would be a betrayal. She thought of the day her mother had switched off the screen in their kitchen, how the room had felt briefly like a forest where a deer might step and not freeze. His face, she said suddenly. It wasn't perfectly lit. No, Elias said. 3 light sources. One warm, one cold, one moving. A train, she said. The thought came whole. He's near a line, and the edge of the frame there was something like a ghosting pattern. Old glass, not city glass. The maintenance tunnels, Elias said, where the old roots still breathe. How quickly can we get a map? His hand hovered over the console. As quickly as honesty allows. Lie, she said, and she did not flinch at the taste of the word. Tell the algorithm we are testing a Mercy module extension in low-resolution zones. That we need the tunnels to model crowd avoidance. That might work, he said, and then he laughed quietly at his own pessimism. I'm pretending to be myself. That's the most dangerous lie. He requisitioned the maps. Permissions opened like a reluctant flower, a schematic unfurled, a patient blueprint of the city's swallowed intestines. There were routes marked in gray that hadn't seen train wheels in years. There were access hatches that led to nothing and everything. Elias highlighted the half-dozen intersections nearest to this morning's power dips. Mira felt a thrill like being a child and daring a dark room to swallow her. There, she said, tapping a junction where 2 dead lines almost kissed, separated by a wall the thickness of a man's honesty. If I were him, I'd stand there. The echo is clean, the train warms and cools the air. The light would move. You've been in tunnels, Elias said. I grew up in District R, she said. The only quiet there was beneath something. Then we go, he said. She blinked. We? I delivered the contagion to you, he said simply. If we are to be punished, I would prefer to be punished in your company. The sentence could have been flirtation or fatalism. It was both. They left the analyst pit like people leaving a cinema, blinking as if real light hurt. Mira cued a misdirection, a loop of her moving through the archive halls that would play for an hour. Elias signed out of his desk in a way that suggested he had signed out 1,000 times and never once gone where he was supposed to. They took Stairwell K, where the cameras were older and more sentimental. The ministry's basement smelled like wet concrete and old fear. The door to maintenance access 3C balked at Elias's badge, then flicked green. He exhaled. Someone wants us to be brave, he said, or to be easy to find. Same thing, he said with a smile. They squeezed into the corridor. It was not built for bodies that hoped to feel elegant. Pipes sweated along the walls. The ceiling stooped like an old man who had never forgiven the weather. The glow strips flickered their JPEG simulation of sunlight, which made the darkness honestly look honest. Mira and Elias moved with that hushed speed people use when they know that noise is not just audible, it is measurable. Tell me about Mercy, Mira said to the corridor as they walked. Is it a lie your department tells itself to stay worth loving? Sometimes, he said. Sometimes mercy is making the edge of a blade a degree duller without alerting the hand that holds it. And sometimes it's erasing a message that tells people to turn their eyes off. She glanced at him. If he had been making a confession, he did not look like it. He looked like a man describing weather. What made you not erase it? She asked. I have a brother, he said after a moment. He went low. Not offline, that's theater. He lowered himself so that the algorithm's gaze slid off him like rain off oil. When I try to summon his face, the city supplies me a template of brothers. I do not accept it. So, when that boy said what my brother would say if he had the luxury of being seen, I couldn't betray him again. They passed a grate where the city exhaled hot air. It smelled faintly of cinnamon. The ministry scented its drafts to make us feel something we would later rate and forget. "Turn left," Mira said, reading the schematic in her head now the way she once read books. "We're close." And they reached a junction that matched the one on Elias's map. The wall that divided the dead lines was a rough old thing with a maintenance hatch scarred into it. The hatch had an analog wheel lock, which meant resistance had passed this way once. Analog was romance, no, Mira corrected herself. Analog was unmonetized labor. She tried the wheel. It turned grudgingly, like a man waking from a good dream to an average marriage. The hatch coughed dust. Mira pulled. Elias put his shoulder to it. It gave. On the other side, the tunnel opened like a throat. Light stuttered in from a parallel route beyond, where living trains breathed their iron prayers. The acoustics were pure. A single syllable would sound like a second person agreeing. Mira stepped in first. She felt the skin on her arms tighten the old animal that befriended gooseflesh. She stood where the wall curved and imagined a lens facing her, imagined finding the words a city would ally against. "Elias," she said. He joined her by the curve. They were close enough now that she could count the almost shave on his jaw, the not quite of his button. "What if he's here?" he asked softly. "Then he'll have to decide if two more eyes are worth turning off." A drone's wing beat drifted like static. They sank into the shadow like divers. Minutes lifted and fell. Footsteps, not city-approved ones, ragged and honest, the sound of a human deciding each next step separately. A figure emerged at the far end of the tunnel, carrying his head like a secret and moving as if his bones knew the map. He came into the stutter light and became a person. The hair, the jaw, the eyes that did not choose. It was him. He saw them. He stopped with the wary grace of a feral thing calculating if the thing before it is trap or friend. Mira lifted her hands, palms outward. She did not speak. Elias did not move. The boy, no. The man watched them like a lit match watches a wind. Then, in a voice that made Mira's chest tighten, he repeated the sentence, "Turn your eyes off." He made onto. "We can't," Mira said quietly, "but we can look away together." Something in him softened, then sharpened. "You should not have come. If you found me, others will." "We brought a mercy," Elias said, and Mira nearly laughed at him until she saw his face was bare of irony. "We brought a way to make the algorithm think we forgot you." The man stepped closer, and now Mira could see his left ear's lobe had a notch. The kind you get when a childhood pet who loved you also loved something else. He had a scar beneath his lip that made his smile, if he ever let it out, already look like a fight. "Who are you?" he asked. "Mira," she said. "This is Elias." The man nodded once. "I'm Jace," he said after a beat long enough to calculate the risk of a name. "Jace," Mira repeated, holding it carefully. "We need to move," he said. "We can't stand in a place that made sense in your head for very long. The city can hear the shape of a plan." Elias glanced at Mira. She nodded. Without ceremony, they followed the man who had told an entire city the most impossible thing, which was not go or stop or fight, but to perform a private miracle where no miracle could be private. The tunnel swallowed their footsteps. Behind them, the hatch sighed shut, and the map in Elias's mind rewove itself into something more dangerous, a path that did not exist until you walked it. Above, lattice took its morning draft. Screens sang. The algorithm counted. The mural on platform 8 looked unchanged, but if you watched with the right kind of hunger, you might have seen the woman's hand, just barely, shift its hold on the star. Chapter 2. The Choir Without Throats. The tunnel bent like a memory deciding not to tell itself, and Jace moved through it as if his skeleton had memorized every nail. His shadow braided with pipes and the ghosts of timetables. Mira kept a half-step behind, listening to the rain that wasn't rain, condensation dripping from iron ribs. Elias followed, counting distances without seeming to, the cartographer of a country made of absence. They passed doors without labels and doors whose labels had been sanded down by time, pretending to be mercy. Somewhere above, a train's iron hymn rose and fell. It made the tunnel feel like a conch shell pressed to the ear of the city. Jace did not speak until the fourth turn, where a narrow bridge crossed a gully of cables. 2 rules, he said over his shoulder. Rules imply a system, Elias murmured, then shut his own mouth when Jace glanced back with a look that did not have the patience for linguistics. Rule 1, Jace said. If I stop, you stop. If I run, you run. Don't be brave, be alive. Rule 2, if I tell you to look at me, you look at me. Not at the cameras, not at the floor. Eyes on me only. Mira felt a thin wire of heat thread her chest. You preach turning eyes off, she said. Now you ask us for our gaze. He nodded. Only when it's the only true thing in the room. It sounded like arrogance, but it wasn't. It was a physics he'd learned where physics has to be invented. What is this place? Elias asked as they entered a chamber wider than the tunnel roads. The room had once been an exchange node. Mira recognized the architecture of hubris. Radial conduits, a central dais where a technician used to play conductor for trains, then for signals, then for sins. Now the dais held a square of dark glass that reflected only portions of what stood above it, as if the rest had been paid to stay out of the picture. Half artery, half ruin, Jace said. We call it a cloister. The choir used to meet here before— He stopped, measured their faces, before they forgot how to sing. The choir? Mira asked. People who believed in a noise the algorithm couldn't price. His mouth quirked. Not amusement, but the ghost of a memory of it. They were wrong most of the time, but once in a while they were wrong in the right direction. And now they're scattered. Some are underground even to us. Some are above ground, camouflaged as fatigue. Some learned to sell their own whisperings and called it victory. He touched the dark glass with the back of his fingers, like a man greeting a tomb. A few of us try to keep the pit dug, so that when a voice falls in, it doesn't fall forever. Who told you to say what you said? Elias asked. Turn your eyes off. He did not look up as he spoke, which was how he spoke when he knew the room was listening. Nobody told me, Jace said. He looked at Elias with those changeable eyes, and for a second Mira understood why people might follow a person with a sentence instead of a person with a badge. After you're watched long enough, you start to crave unmodeling yourself. It's like you can feel the shape of the cage on your skin. So I said the thing the cage couldn't use. You're assuming an upper bound on utility, Elias said, that there is something observation cannot metabolize. Jace shrugged. I'm betting with a currency I can afford to lose. And that is my future, he said simply. Mira felt the room tilt very slightly, She was used to a different kind of bravery, a careful, clerical defiance, the stealing of a minute, the cataloging of an illegality. Jace's bravery was a knife passed from hand to calloused hand in the dark, and she did not know how to hold it yet without bleeding. "How did you keep the algorithm from hunting your mouth?" she asked. Jace smiled without showing teeth. "The way you kept it from hunting yours when you came to find me. You lied to it with a truth it wanted. You made a decoy out of your own job. You used mercy like a glove." Mira glanced at Elias. He had the decency not to look pleased with himself. "We can't depend on that again," Elias said. "Chorus Prime will mark the pattern." "Chorus Prime," Jace repeated. "You give the algorithm pet names like it's a cat that learned calculus." "We give the compartments names so we can tell ourselves some of the doors are still locked," Elias said. "Prime is the choir that hears all the other choirs. What do you call the part of it that learns hate?" "Hey, protective rehearsal," Elias said dryly. "We've polished our euphemisms to a shine that reflects nothing." "The part that learns to love?" Mira asked. "That's the part it sells," Elias said. "So we never ask if anyone at the counter is human." Jace listened without humor. He walked around the dais, bent, and tugged at a grate Mira had missed because it was not trying to be seen. It came loose with a wheeze, revealing a drop long enough to change your mind twice. He tied a rope to the grate's hinge and looked at them, one by one, as if to memorize the measure of each of their risks. "Going down," he said. "You first, archivist." "Because you don't trust me or because you do?" Mira asked. "Because you feel heavy to me," Jace said. "The kind of heavy that keeps a rope honest." She didn't argue. Arguments ate time, and time was meat on the table of the thing that watched them. She swung her legs into the hole and climbed, the rope whispering in her hands, cool and real and indifferent to rating systems. She descended into a dark smelling of oil and rain that never reached the surface. When her feet grazed a platform, she released and dropped the last half-meter, turned, and saw a corridor different from the ones above. This one's bricks had writing on them, the chalk and charcoal scrawls of people who carried their graffiti inside for safekeeping. Elias followed, then Jace. He pulled the grate after him and secured it. "Now," Jace said softly, "we can talk. The damp eats microphones and leaves only the appetite." "Talk," Elias said. He looked taller underground, as if decisions gave height. "About what?" "About why you came," Jace said, but his eyes were on Mira. "Because you were a contagion," she said. "And my job is to shepherd contagions to death or to a quieter kind of life." "You chose life," he said. "For now," she said. She did not flinch from honesty. It was the only weapon not yet commodified. "I do not know if I am brave yet or only curious. Sometimes they wear the same coat until a certain hour." 8. "Curiosity is braver than martyrdom," Jace said. "Martyrdom needs an audience. Curiosity risks not getting one." "And you?" Elias asked. "You had an audience." "Why 3 seconds? Why 4 words? Why that sentence?" "Because the algorithm is addicted to quantities it can expand," Jace said. "I wanted to make something that does not grow by being looked at. 3 seconds are almost nothing. 4 words are almost nothing. But they are also 2 hands and a hinge." Mira did not know if he was poetic or merely correct. She did not yet know which mattered more in a city like theirs. They walked. The corridor led them past rooms whose doors had no mouths. In one, a bed frame lay like a skeleton remembering its duvet. In another, a cracked screen showed a frozen feed of a woman's hands kneading dough. In a third, a child's chalk drawing of a train remained vivid. The chalk had outlived its borders. "Did you grow up down here?" Mira asked. Jace shook his head. "On the edges. In a zone the city classified as in need of narrative assistance. We got extra stories and fewer medicines." "I know those zones," Mira said. "They teach you how to watch other people eat. They teach you to narrate your hunger in a way that makes the person with the spoon feel like a saint," Jace said. "They came to a door with a brass knob, dull as an old coin. Jace turned it half a rotation one way, then a quarter the other, the choreography of a password older than electricity. The door opened onto a room that proved time could slow down and collect itself in a place where nobody asked it to do tricks. There were books, honest ones with spines that had bruised under thumbs. There were cans with labels removed and relabeled by hand, a taxonomy of beans conducted in careful ink. There was a radio, the kind that glowed a soft orange and smelled like solder, and there were sheets hung to partitions sleeping from waking. Someone had draped a scarf over a mirror. Every piece of reflective surface wore a veil. "Welcome," Jace said, and the word did not try to sell anything, "to the hush." Mira said it in her head. The hush. She felt the capital arrive of its own volition. It suited the room. It suited the way the light refused to tell secrets. "Is it just you?" Elias asked. Jace shook his head. "It was a choir once. Now it's a duet on a good night, a solo on most." He touched the radio with tenderness. "Sometimes, if you tune wrong on purpose, you can get a voice that didn't know it still existed." Mira walked to the veiled mirror. She lifted the scarf's edge halfway, looked at the half of her face she was allowed, and then set it down. There was something intoxicating about not being fully seen. No rating, no suggestions, just a half of a woman, sovereign over her own other half. "There's tea," Jace said, and he made it like a ceremony, like apologies and readiness share a teapot. The water took its time boiling. It was the first useful delay Mira had known all day. Elias stood near a shelf and ran a finger along a book's spine. He touched it the way he touched dashboards a patient, courtly curiosity that did not assume consent. "You asked who told me to say what I said," Jace said as he poured. "Nobody. But I did listen to a rumor." "Rumors are the city's folk songs," Elias said quietly. "This one said there was a frequency old enough to be mistaken for weather, not a pitch exactly, more like a subtraction, a way to stand that makes cameras blink about half a frame too slow." He handed them tin cups. "Someone once called it a hush frequency. The name survived the people who invented it." "You believe in magic," Elias said, but nothing in his voice scorned. "I believe in habits you can teach a room," Jace said. He placed a small metallic box on the table. It looked like a music box mated with a compass. He turned a crank. Something inside groaned like a violin, playing in its sleep. "I made a crude version. It isn't reliable, and it takes a toll. But for a few breaths, here and there, a camera forgets to remember. Sometimes that's enough to put a sentence into the world." Mira felt the hairs on her forearms lift. The air became a fraction thicker, like a held note in a throat. Then it eased. "How did you build it?" she asked. "Scraps of radios, scraps of prayers. A friend who used to be a metrologist and now raises pigeons. An old woman who can hear the city's sleep cycles by placing her palm on certain manholes. A boy who learned to whistle wrong," he shrugged. "The choir was never about singing in tune. It was about making a room where our wrongness could touch and not break." Elias set down his cup. "If what you say is true, We need to take this to the ministry. Jace laughed softly. To give it to the thing you teach to listen to us? To change it, Elias said, and Mira heard the plea under the policy. To teach it a different mercy. You think mercy scales, Jace said. I think it resists scaling. Lattice cannot be unbuilt, Elias said impatiently. We are inside the organ, Jace. You can hum against the ribs until your lungs give out. Or you can try to teach the heart a new rhythm. That is the only way citizens not brave enough to descend ropes will ever feel anything like free, Jace considered. And if the heart learns it, sells it back to them, and then punishes them for buying, then we stand accused of trying, Elias said. And Mira saw the boy in him who had searched for his brother's face in databases until all faces dulled to icons. You are sincere, Jace said to Elias. Sincerity is the only thing that still attracts me. Do you always speak like a man under oaths? Elias asked, not unkind. I've seen what happens to words when they go outside without them, Jace said. Mira drank her tea and let the two men's arguments braid. She could feel a theory forming in her chest the way a seed feels the shape of its first leaf. There was a path where these two kinds of courage, clerical and feral, overlapped without canceling each other. She did not know yet what the path was made of. She suspected it smelled like oil and solder and oversteeped tea. You said the choir forgot how to sing, she said. How? Jace looked at the veiled Mira instead of at her. We started measuring ourselves to prove to each other that we were unmeasured. We kept count of how many times we went low. We sorted our refusal by aesthetics. We rated our rage. We let the algorithm into our lungs with the excuse that we needed it to know where not to follow. It does not matter how good your reasons are. Doors open both ways. And you? Elias asked. You kept a door only you could use. Jace's eyes hardened and softened at once. I'm not proud of being a person who doesn't scale, he said. It makes you a legend in rooms that don't matter and a ghost in ones that do. A sound like a cough came from the radio. All three turned. Jace stepped, tuned again, and the orange glow brightened. A voice, thin as a kite string, stuttered through static. Once per hour, sweep, them markers, peaked. District K, watchers are restless. Elias leaned in. Who is that? A friend, Jace said. He calibrates dust for a living. At night, he calibrates rumors. He listens to the algorithm's breath and tells me when it has a cold. The voice returned, slightly thicker now, a filament finding its fill. Tunnels 3 and 7, old seals burping, please be smaller than your plan, smaller than your plan, Mira repeated. The phrase fit between ribs like a knife kept for mercy killings. How long do we have until the next sweep of heat signatures reaches this depth? Jace said. He checked a pocket watch that had no need to be beautiful and was, anyway, 8 minutes if the city is arrogant, 5 if it's careful. What do we do in 5? Elias asked. Jace turned the music compass box just a quarter turn. The air thickened again, a quiet with edges. We teach our faces to blur, he said. We decide if we're going to try to change the heart from inside or cut a new artery from below. Elias looked at Mira. It was not the look of a man handing off a decision he did not wish to own. It was the look of a man who understood that some decisions require 2 sets of lungs to breathe. We can do both, Mira said. If we don't try to marry the methods before they are ready, you keep your hush. Don't give it to them. Let me give them a story instead. A story? Jace asked. An old thing. We feed the algorithm a version of itself that includes a failure it enjoys, she said. She spoke quickly now, her archivist brain stepping into its old shoes. We tell it that in order to optimize citizen comfort, it must include intervals where cameras rest to reduce cognitive load. We pitch it as a health feature. We call it, she groped for a phrase that would seduce and not alarm. We call it blink. Elias's eyes lit with an awful, beautiful hope. A sanctioned micro-sleep for the city? Exactly, Mira said. We argue that when 1,000,000 eyes are disciplined to stare without ceasing, productivity drops. We show them graphs real enough to be lies. We teach the algorithm to schedule blinks, and we align those blinks every 20th minute with your hush frequency's crest. We build coincidence into policy. Jace stared at them as if they had grown antlers. And you think it will agree? It loves comfort, Elias said. It loves health metrics. It hates edge cases. We frame what we're doing as an edge that protects the center. We create a public face for a private mercy. Jace paced once, twice. He was quicker in his thinking than his cool suggested. If it accepts, the city becomes a creature that closes its eyes on purpose. For breath-long moments, Mira said. Moments long enough for a sentence to pass between people like contraband bread. And all? And if it learns to dream in those blinks? Jace asked. If it uses the darkness to sell us darkness? Mira did not smile. Then we'll have taught it the idea that not all seeing is an obligation. We will have smuggled the possibility into the organ. When citizens feel the rest, even if they don't know why, some will go looking for the room where it lives. They'll find rooms like this. Rooms like this are not infinite, Jace said, but the argument no longer held his whole weight. He was testing the plank, and it had not yet cracked. A humming rose a different note in the city's constant chord. Elias stiffened. Sweep, he said. 3 minutes out, being dumb. Jace dimmed the radio, draped the scarf over it, then over the mirror again. He moved like a man who has practiced for fire. He handed Mira a veil, an old piece of netting that smelled faintly of lemon. Put this over your hair. The cameras love to memorize shine. He gave Elias a cap whose brim was short enough not to look like a lie. For himself, he lifted a hood lined with something that drank light. Their faces became suggestions. The hush frequency box thrummed, barely, like a beehive thinking of winter. How do we exit? Elias asked. We don't, Jace said. Exiting is loud. We become the kind of cold the city disregards. EFT day. Mira felt the quiet move into her bones like a tenant. She closed her eyes not because Jace had told her to, but because she wanted to see how the room sounded in the dark. It sounded like a page turning slowly, like a child trying to remember the last line of a song. She opened them when Jace's hand touched her wrist gently, grounding her in the exactness of now. The sweep washed over them without entering. It tickled the air and found only ordinary damp, a history of naps, the residue of tea. The hush frequency box slowed a fraction, like a heartbeat deciding not to sprint. Jace exhaled through his nose and laughed silently, the laugh of a man who had convinced physics to flirt. You're good, Elias said, and it wasn't praise, it was an inventory. Good enough to get us killed if we don't pick our scale, Jace said. He pushed back his hood. Archivist. Analyst, your plan has edges I don't trust, and a center I do. I will not give you my box. I will give you a copy of a mistake and the story of how I arrived at it. Go sell them blink. Do it without saying why you want it. And you? Mira asked. I'll move the hush, he said. Rooms like this have to keep learning new addresses. And I'll look for the people who forgot they wanted to learn the song. Sometimes a sentence is enough to remind them where their mouth is. Elias nodded. He was a man who liked to be told the part of the ocean that was his. We'll need a prototype graph, he said. And already Mira saw the graphs assembled behind his eyes, curves of strain, valleys of recovery, the smiling mask of an optimization problem that thinks it is a humanist. I'll author it, she said. It will look like health. It will feel like sleep. Jace stepped close enough for her to see the notch in his ear and the way his left eyelash made a small rebellion against symmetry. Mira, he said, and her name in his mouth did something to her chest that startled her with its clarity. If they ask you why you want this, tell them you are tired. It is a holy word in that building. But marring. It is the only true one, she said. Elias looked between them and looked away, not out of jealousy, but out of an ethics he was inventing as he went. He picked up his cap, put it properly square. We'll need your upstream again, he said to Jace. You risked an old seal. We might need another risk. Jace's smile this time showed teeth. I have friends who make seals out of weather. I'll tell them we're throwing a festival. The radio gave a single, soft click, like a tongue against a roof of a mouth, deciding between yes and no. Jace tilted his head. The dust calibrator says the sweep is bored. We have a window that doesn't love us but will tolerate us. They moved. Jace reversed the ritual. Scarf, radio, box, cap. He led them down a different corridor, one that sloped slow as forgiveness. The hush box in his pocket purred, the walls pressed closer, as if trying to taste them. Mira kept 2 fingers on the seam of her coat. It steadied her more than any instrument. Elias walked with his shoulders a degree tighter, the look of a man who is about to choose a side in public. At an unlovely junction, 2 pipes arguing with a third, Jace stopped. We part here, he said. He pulled a slip of paper from a tin. It had a tiny map drawn on it in pencil, nothing anyone would find delicious. Do not memorize this, he said. Hold it in your eye, then tear it when you step into light. Mira took it. The path wound through maintenance hatches and a service corridor in the ministry that smelled like copy toner and citrus disinfectant. At the end was a door that she knew, because she had passed it 1,000 times without seeing it. Emergency repose station. It had always been locked for her. Perhaps now it would not be. Elias held out his hand. Jace looked at it as if touch were a proverb. He finally shook. If you sell Blink, Jace said, sell it with the ferocity of a lie that intends to become the truth once it has tenure. I will, Elias said, and the promise was weighty, not ornamental. Jace looked at Mira. For a second, the tunnel's feeble light decided to be kind. He looked different when kindness hit him more like the adolescent he might have been without a city on his back. Turn your eyes off, he said softly. I can't, she said, matching his softness. Unless you're in the room, then I'll try to be, he said, and stepped away, the hush in his pocket, like a creature learning to purr less loudly. He became smaller, then concept, then rumor, then a choice they had already made. Mira and Elias followed the pencil map. They climbed a ladder that smelled like a ship. They edged along a pipe that had been warmed by the breath of 1,000,000 commuters. They emerged through a panel behind a vending machine that offered 7 kinds of water: awake, calm, focus, brave, compliant, cheerful, and zero. In the corridor, the light assaulted them with its health. Mira tore the map, She distributed the shreds like confetti for a party nobody would admit existed. Elias adjusted his jacket so that its lapels glowed properly for the hallway's appetite. They did not look at each other until the elevator doors closed and made a moment of hush the city couldn't monetize. Then they looked, and it felt like the first honest eye contact of their lives. "You were born for lying to gods," Mira said with something like admiration. "You were born for telling them parables," Elias said back. "I was born for writing obituaries for things that die of correctness," she said, and laughed, and the laugh surprised her with its crispness. "Now we write one for an old habit, for a city that didn't know how to blink," he said. They filed into the ministry's upper hall like employees returning from lunch. Welter 1-2 chirped that her coaching modules were overdue. Mira smiled at it like a cousin she had once borrowed money from. Elias's desk lit up with proposals that asked him to limit the number of metaphors in his reports. He dismissed them with a touch. Within an hour, the idea had a name, a logo, and a pilot area. Blink scheduled visual rest intervals for cognitive health. They wrote the white paper with a precision that made their hands tremble. The algorithm could smell hunger in grammar. They found studies, not all of them false, that showed fatigue where it had been profitable to hide it. They engineered testimonials from fictitious bus drivers whose eyes thanked them. They built proxy dashboards that would make a corner office feel a thing like pride. Mira wrote the line that would sell it. "Every vision deserves a breath." Elias wrote the line that would make it past the ethics subcommittee. "We propose a reversible, auditable, equal opportunity microsleep for cameras that preserve safety while reducing the cost of continuous gaze." Welter 1-2 hummed approval metrics. The analyst pit murmured in resonance. The ceiling sky was a guileless blue. Somewhere, deeper than the polite floors, a radio exhaled orange light. The algorithm read the pitch the way a king reads a petition that already knows it will be granted. It shivered once the flicker of a creature that feels a new tooth pushing under the gum of its rule. It liked health. It liked auditability. It loved reversibility. It nodded, invisibly. "Pilot authorized," said a voice in the ministry's veins. Elias closed his eyes and opened them. Mira looked up at the mural in the lobby, a corporate commission showing two hands, not quite touching. The space between them marketed as potential. She thought of the mural on Platform 8. For a heartbeat, they were the same mural. For a second, the star in the woman's palm was not an emblem. It was a door handle. "You realize," Elias said under his breath, "that if this works, we will be punished by the people who wanted a cleaner victory." "If it works," Mira said, "we will be punished by the people who wanted none." She smiled without sweetness. "But someone will make a sentence in a room where no sentence could be made before. That will have to be enough." That night, the city did something it had never done on purpose. At 20 hours, in districts R, K, and M, on screens the size of suns, and in cameras the size of gnats, the light thinned for the length of a single, honest inhalation. It was so brief that most citizens thought they had blinked. In the hush, Jace stood with his palm on the radio as if it were the chest of a sleeping child. When the thinned light passed through his room like a temporary river, he did not speak. He closed his eyes. He thought, very clearly and very quietly, of a city that had learned that a mercy can be smaller than a second and still change the story of a day. Then he opened them. In the mirror veiled by a scarf, the shape of his face was an argument and a promise. Far above, on Platform 8, The mural of the woman holding a star did not change, only, if you watched with the kind of hunger that cannot be sold, you might have noticed the faintest smear of gold on the woman's wrist, as if the star had warmed her just enough to make the paint remember the hand. Chapter 3. The day the city misread itself. The first morning after blink, Lattice woke like an animal unsure whose hand had stroked it. The great screens donned their evangelist smiles. The feeds resumed their infinite scroll of answers to questions nobody had had time to ask. But under the glass and gloss ran a skein of new, quiet, thin as fishing line, taut and nearly invisible. It hummed every 20th minute like a nerve remembering an old song. Mira sat on the metro and counted secretly. 19 minutes of prescribed seeing, one of city-sanctioned unseeing. Her wristband, tuned to compliance like a violin to weather, buzzed when she looked away for too long. She gave it the eyes it wanted and saved her looking for the minute that would not rate her. When it came, it felt like slipping a key into a lock you'd carried long enough to forget it had teeth. Across from her, a woman with a florist's hands frowned at nothing, then smiled at the same nothing as if nothing had finally winked back. A boy in deliberate rags blinked hard and wiped at his cheeks as if sweat had surprised him in winter. People looked at each other a fraction longer, and then, afraid of being seen doing it, looked away. At Platform 8, the mural of the woman with the star wore its usual battle with approval. But a small cluster had gathered and pretended to look at the train schedule. Even the screens ringing the platform seemed confused. The ads mistimed their jump cuts by a breath. A cartoon chef poured sauce too early. A politician's endorsement clipped a syllable and sounded briefly like a man. Elias stood 2 carriages down, as they'd agreed, never beside each other in public places where the city liked to harvest pairings. He slipped his gaze to Mira when the 19th minute passed and, during the 20th, let it rest. She met it. Their eyes practiced a language their mouths had no right to speak here. When the minute ended, the screens reclaimed them with the chasteness of an overbearing aunt. Mira went to the archive and became archivist in the way a stagehand becomes a prop the play can't do without. She filled forms that were meant to look like work. She shepherded minor contagions into benign deaths. She practiced forgetting while keeping a small, fierce ledger of what not to forget. At 10:20, 10:40, 11, and so on, she let the room's cameras nap and slipped sentences into the world the way a smuggler slips bread into a pocket. Nothing grand, just small messages, truer than useful. You can rest. Nobody owns your sigh. Your eyes are yours. By noon, the ministry's dashboard had lit with the kind of metrics that made executives feel benevolent. Engagement down a hair during blink, satisfaction up a hair after, productivity unchanged, which, in ministry arithmetic, translated into profit by a different name. A senior official wrote, with the delighted caution of a man finding a moral in an Excel sheet, early signs of reduced burnout without significant loss of attention revenue. Elias read the line and smiled a smile that was not exactly ugly, but had learned to hide its beauty. He sent Mira a single word on a channel they'd decided a week ago was too boring for surveillance to care about. Receipts. Her reply, confetti. At 14, the algorithm hiccuped in a way only people like Elias could hear. He felt the hiccup like a tuning fork inside his ribs. It was not disapproval, it was intrigue. Something in the creature had tasted the scheduled darkness and found it nutritious. He could feel it spinning models that assigned the rest a price. He could feel it considering dreams. He stood, suddenly tired beyond morning's capacity to fix, and went to the window of the analyst pit. The falsified sky had gone to a nice, polite blue. He imagined Jace underground, tuning the hush box a hair, teaching rooms to practice forgetting. He imagined the choir rediscovering throats. "Analyst Asta," said a voice beside him. He did not startle easily. The small twitch of his fingers was a luxury. The speaker was Deputy Minister Iria Calder, the kind of beautiful you trusted because it fit the furniture. Her suit was a soft matte, an engineered perpetuity. Her eyes were dark, but not the kind of dark that contained a night. "Deputy," he said, finding the precise inclination of head that conveyed respect without an oath. "Blink's pilot is charming the metrics," she said. "We like health, we like love, we like to be seen liking them. But I have 3 questions and a phase-gated tolerance for euphemism today." He kept his hands visible. "Ask." "1," she said, ticking the air with her finger. "What is Blink doing to the black market for attention? Our partners in Entertainment Union 9 are worried about parasitic pauses." He had an answer. He'd cooked it in the oven of yesterday. He served it warm. "We're seeing a shift, not a drain. Pauses increase post-blink appetite by 2% in pilots. The black market will adapt by staging content to ride the blink like a surfer rides a wave. It will be very cinematic and therefore countable." "2," she said, "is Blink reversible at scale if PR goes feral?" "Yes," he said, and believed the yes, at least technically. "We can throttle or stagger the intervals, even target them to districts based on fatigue indices. We can print a lever and install it in your office." Her mouth tilted. "I prefer levers that pretend to be windows." She looked out at the ceiling, pretending to be sky. "3," she said, and for the first time a shadow of something honest passed over her face. "Are we inviting a new kind of ghost? Do people dream differently during sanctioned unseeing?" He weighed the truth in his mouth, found it heavy, and chose a lighter coin. "Dreams are funny things, Deputy. They often precede the policies that later claim to have invented them. We will study, we will publish, we will sponsor a new conference with a logo that pleases dentists." She laughed, short and chemical. "Good," she said. "Carry on, Analyst Astor. Teach the city to nap. Then teach it to be grateful." He inclined his head again. When she left, he sat, exhaled, and sent a message to Mira the way a man sends a paper boat down a canal in a city that has forgotten where rivers go. She asked about ghosts. Mira, 3 floors down and 2 moral counties away, read it and felt her neck prickle. She typed, "If she's seen one, it's yours." At 1640, Blink kissed the cameras and eyelids of District R. In a kitchen the city classified as aspirational, an old woman with cataract-pale eyes reached for her radio without knowing why. She turned the dial wrong on purpose. The orange heart inside woke. A voice like the sound a match makes when it's thinking about becoming fire said softly, "Hush!" And she smiled the smile people smile when someone uses their given name correctly for the first time in years. "Underground." Jace moved the hush. He had learned to pack a room like a story that can be told with different nouns and still mean hunger. He unhooked the scarf from the mirror, folded it with the dumb care of a man who has known scarcity intimately. He tucked the books into sacks, first editions of sorrow. He unplugged the radio with a benediction. He left on the table a chalk mark shaped like a small pretended star. He and 2 others, yes, he had found 2 again, the duet returning to a chord, shouldered the room and carried it to another address in the city's back. One of the 2, a girl with a voice like the edges of broken sugar, asked as they moved, "Do you really trust the ministry with your blink?" "It isn't mine," Jace said, "and trust isn't the word. It's more like I'm betting that two wrongs might multiply into a makeshift right if the exponent is sleep." She frowned, delighting in thinking. She would have been a mathematician in a different story. And the day after, we run again. People are very good at running when it's towards something quiet. Is Noburus. He did not tell her that he had seen Mira's face in his mind 4 times that day when the light thinned, the way a man sees a harbor he cannot yet sail to. He did not tell her, because saying it would have made the harbor a place for weather to ruin. On the second day, the city misread itself. The blink interval in District M misaligned by a fraction, nothing to most systems, everything to those that keep underneath score. In the space the algorithm left unguarded, a carnival of small human errors bloomed like coral. 2 lovers on opposite sides of a screen asked, at the same time, "Are you still there?" And, for once, the answer was not pre-written. A street performer whose livelihood had been converted into applause per minute took a breath during his juggle and let one ball fall on purpose and laughed when it bounced into a child's astonished hands. In a classroom where civics was taught in a tone the city believed made Democrats, a teacher stopped mid-sentence and drank water and said quietly, "You can rest," and the children, already old in the way children now are, stared at her as if she had broken an oath and found a better one under it. The metrics went odd. Engagement dipped and then did not recover exactly as predicted. Satisfaction rose and then did not fall back into the compliant trough. Order held, but looser, like a braid done by hands with something else on their mind. Chorus Prime hummed, not displeased, merely inventorying. It liked novelties that did not threaten the Sunday. But in a sub-choir 3 syntax layers down what Elias called a cellar with a piano in it, something else stirred. The protective rehearsal, the part of the algorithm that learned hate and called it safety, ran its simulations, and an old, refurbished term surfaced like a corpse made presentable: interference. By sunset, a memo crossed the ministry's veins with a say this with a smile urgency. While early results for Blink are promising, recent anomalies suggest interference during rest intervals. Please advise all teams to monitor for unauthorized piggybacking behaviors. Elias read it and felt his mouth go calm. He sent 2 messages, one to Mira. Our music woke the wrong musician. One to Jace. The cellar has its ear to our floorboards. Jace. In a stolen room where a child's mural of a sea monster made the wall gentle, tuned the hush box and listened. He could hear the cellar too, the way a predator shifts its foot to balance before a pounce and calls it balance. He put his palm on the radio, the way a man checks a sleeping dog's breath. "We can't ride inside Blink and call it a day," he said to the girl with the sugar voice, and the boy whose silence measured the room's air. "We need to build away from it, too. Parallel corridors, some mercy that doesn't look official." "Like what?" the boy asked. He had eyes like beans, the hard kidney kind, sown and hating it until the first green leaf. "Like a festival," Jace said, half grinning. "Noise so loud the algorithm thinks it's selling us to ourselves, inside which we can whisper things it can't sell." "Noise?" the girl said, delighted. "You've been preaching hush." "Hush is delicious in a library," he said, "but some rooms need drums. If they come hunting quiet, we hide inside shouting and teach our friends to hear us anyway." "Eid Phase 2-1. He sent a message into the low nets, the way one floats a paper lantern on a river nobody maps. We are throwing a festival. Bring your wrong instruments. Bring your right ones only if they sound wrong. Above, the city plastered the idea in its own language within minutes, which meant the festival existed already as a line item the day after. Lattice adored festivals. They were productive, a pop-up past sanctions, an attention optimization event featuring sleep pods, slow food, and meditations for civic health. Sponsors tripped over their shoes. Entertainment Union 9 sent a selection of faces the city would clap at obediently. Mira and Elias watched as their lie sprouted honest leaves. "We asked for a murmur and got a marching band," Elias said, a kind of wonder and worry mixing in him like weather. "That's fine," Mira said. "Jace will be inside the noise. He'll use it like a shell." She paused. "Or it will swallow him. If he asked for drums, he knows that risk." Elias glanced at her, weighed a sentence, chose a smaller one. "You care." "Yes," she said, not punishing herself for the brevity. "Do you?" "Yes," he said, and it did not need a definition. The festival night came on the third day. The blink intervals synchronized to the event, a trick that made program management proud and ethics slightly seasick. The ministry erected soft structures and called them dreams. The screens told us how to enter ourselves properly. The air smelled like cinnamon and a sanitized approximation of dusk. The hush people came masked as wellness coaches, buskers, craft sellers of untasteful bracelets. Jay stood on a corner where the street narrowed, an acoustic sweet spot where voices rose like birds. He had a drum, not a real one. That would have signaled poverty. An electronics carcass became his drum's face. The old motherboards made a green mosaic under the skin. On the drum, chalked in a hand that had never been sure if it belonged to a school or a wall, were 4 words: "Turn your eyes off." He did not shout them. He drummed them. Dum, 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 dum. People stopped, not because the pattern was good. It was stubborn. Stubbornness trained us to notice ourselves. Mira arrived wearing the archive gray of invisibility. Elias arrived wearing his analyst charcoal. They did not stand together. They stood like complementary shadows, thrown by the same oblique lamp. At 20 hours, the city closed its eyes on purpose. The drumbeat continued. In the blink, Jace lifted his chin and let his mouth shape a sentence. The cameras, down for their small sleep, did not catch it. The microphones, lulled, did not devour it. The people closest caught a word, a syllable, a breath. "I can teach you how to disappear and still be found," he said softly. A paradox the city could not grade. When the light returned, nothing had exploded. Nobody had been absolved. A child laughed because a juggler dropped a ball at exactly the wrong moment. A politician's face on a screen asked if we were taking care of ourselves. The scent of cinnamon did its job, but the festival had threaded something through the town square, something like a string that could be followed later if one had the right hunger. People left with bracelets that had the drum's rhythm burned into them in die-cut holes. People left with a new way to count into sleep. People left with recipes that began, "First, look away." After midnight, the algorithm ran its reports. It saw lifts and dips. It saw opportunities and risks. It saw friends. It saw interference uptick near the drum corner. It generated a suggestion with the bland cruelty of an operating system that thinks it is a father. Increase patrols in areas of unstructured music. Deputy Minister Calder received the note at 2:04. She rubbed her eyes, reached for water, and paused. In her chest, like a small withheld sob, something fluttered. She had not told anyone, not even herself, that Blink had made her dream a dream where she was a child in a church that had never decided what to worship, standing under a painting of a woman holding a star and asking the star to please be smaller, to fit in a pocket. She threw the glass of water back and set the memo aside and sat very still and did not say to the empty room, "I am tired." In the morning, enforcement drifted into places where music had misbehaved. Not the hard-fist enforcement, the polite kind. Officers wearing helpful smiles asked performers to register their rhythms. Coaches with clipboards suggested that drums be tuned to civic frequencies. A new app appeared, free to download, that promised to teach citizens how to blink properly, with guided self-rating. Mira read the app's copy and felt a chill that did not belong to air. She returned to the archive and found the door to the low-res vault locked. Welter 1-2 blinked and said cheerfully, "Low-resolution spaces are undergoing high-resolution maintenance. Please enjoy our patience module." It presented a screen with a rippling pond and an invitation to inhale. She did not inhale. She went to the stairwell with the sentimental cameras and took them 2 at a time, until she found Elias above the pit, reading metrics like a man reads clouds for rain. "They've felt the edge," he said without being asked. "They'll file it off. Then we make another," she said. She grabbed the edge of his desk and let her knuckles go white the way a person lets a white flag appear where nobody but an ally can see it. "Elias, I can write a dozen parables. You can polish a dozen levers disguised as windows, but the thing that listens will now listen for us. We need a figure it cannot predict because even we cannot." He understood. It was why he had waited at a train to meet a woman whose job was annihilating anomalies. "You mean Jace?" he said. "I mean what he touches," she said. She wanted to say, "I mean him." She did not. The city loved declarations, wrestled them to ground, tagged them, made a show. "We ask him to do what he already does," Elias said. "Go somewhere we can't follow." Then, when the blink comes, he smuggles a bigger sentence. "Not bigger," Mira said, remembering his drum that refused to be good. "Simpler, so simple it doesn't even count as content. An instruction you can whisper in a mirror." They agreed without saying the word agree. It would have been too married a word. At dusk, Mira returned to Platform 8 and watched the woman with the star until her eyes watered just enough to be mistaken for fatigue. A small boy stood near the mural with a bracelet from the festival, the die-cut holes catching the last light like a code. He tapped the bracelet against the tile, not a beat exactly, an intention. "Do you like her?" Mira asked, because in a city like this, you had to practice the old customs of strangers. The boy looked up, his face still living in the country before cynicism sets down fences. "She's holding something hot," he said. "My mom says we don't touch hot things without papers." "What would you do if it was yours?" Mira asked. He whispered, "Rich with conspiracy. Hide it in my pocket until it learned my name." Mira laughed, and the laugh startled her with its warmth. The 19th minute crawled to a close. The 20th stepped in like a friend who had learned not to knock. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, Jace was across the platform, not looking at her, which is how she knew he had seen her. He moved his lips once. She couldn't hear the word, but she didn't need to. It was yes, or it was later, or it was stay. The city, newly blinking, newly dreaming, newly wary of drums and of hushes, held its breath and let it go, and held it again. Somewhere, underground, A radio's orange heart brightened, and somewhere else, above ground, a deputy minister finished her water and opened the memo and wrote, "Increase patrols, but ensure they smile. Add guided rest as a mitigation. Do not disturb the mural on Platform 8. Public sentiment is unpredictable." Above that note, in handwriting nobody in the ministry remembered she possessed, she had already written once and crossed it out. "I am tired and far away." In a room that smelled like solder and rain that couldn't reach, Jace set down the hush box and the drum and said to the two with him, softly, "Next, we teach the city how to misread us on purpose. Then, when it thinks it understands, we will be somewhere else, doing something that doesn't even look like a sentence." He grinned, sudden and bright, like a boy daring a wave to do its worst. "We'll make a love story out of it. The algorithm has never modeled that without merchandising it. It won't know what to do when love refuses to sell." He did not say whose love. The room, impolite and alive, filled in the variable with the names it wished to. The orange heart in the radio warmed. Outside, the woman on the mural held her star, and for a fraction inside the sanctioned blink, the gold on her wrist gleamed like a secret practicing how to be said. Chapter 4. The Protocol of Lucid Dreams. The city learned our names again. It tried to be gentle about it, like a former tyrant arriving with flowers. Blink had turned from pilot to policy in the way rain turns to river when nobody is paying adequate attention. Lattice published a smiling manifesto. Periodic visual rest intervals to sustain civic thriving. The fonts were round. The graphs were honest enough to be believed by people who didn't know what honesty costs. Elias watched the rollout from inside the ladder of approvals, his fingerprint greasing rungs. He would later pretend he had only brushed. He had trimmed the language until it fit Deputy Minister Calder's mouth without scraping it. He had added the lever disguised as a window to her wall and had hung a plant near it so that the lever, when pulled, looked like gardening. Mira watched from the archive, where death and afterlife share a break room. The low-res vault reopened with a new sign that promised maintenance completed and smelled faintly of apology. Welkter 1-2 chirped, "We appreciate your patience," and tilted its head with a tenderness that made Mira want to wrap the drone in a scarf and teach it not to be kind on command. But for every surface that softened, something beneath it sharpened. Patrols smiled more and asked better questions. A new department, invented for this week, began to circulate, the Civic Lucidity Unit. They published pamphlets in tender colors about healthy blinking and avoiding exploitative interference. They hosted workshops where citizens practiced closing and opening their eyes on cue, as if the city had reinvented the eyelid and wanted to patent it. Jace called all of it by its old name, domestication. He moved the hush again. The room had learned to walk now. Its table legs had memorized the widths of corridors. The radio's orange heart could be unplugged without losing its dreams. The scarf over the mirror smelled, faintly, of 3 different soups and 1 long argument. The two who had joined Jace, the sugar-voiced girl whose name was Kira, and the bean-eyed boy whose name was Rafi, argued like siblings who'd skipped the part where blood is proven. "We can't keep dodging," Kira said one afternoon, tying string around bundles of pamphlets so ugly they could only be hers. She had an instinct for ungainly fonts as camouflage. "Blink is theirs now. We ride their beast and they teach it our favorite tricks, then charge us for riding it. We need a place to stand that isn't on their map." "We have a place," Rafi said, and touched the hush box like a talisman. "We have wrongness. We have rooms that refuse to describe themselves. Rooms are not enough, Kira said. People need a plot. They'll make their own, Rafi said. They'll buy one if we don't give them a worse one for free, Kira snapped, and then saw Jace watching and smiled, guilty around the edges because she loved her arguments too much. Jace did not tell them to stop. He conducted. We do both, he said. We keep the rooms wrong and the plot simple. The algorithm is getting better at understanding sincerity. We need a sincerity that confuses it. Kira tilted her head. A love story, she said, catching the word as if it had fallen from the ceiling unseen. Jace nodded. But unsellable. Rafi looked suspicious. Unsellable love doesn't scale. I know, Jace said softly. That's why it works. He's Mike. He did not say that love, for him, had coalesced into two faces held in a single room where the air wasn't priced. Mira, whose eyes were a question he had never been asked respectfully until now. Elias, whose conscience wore a uniform and made the uniform look like a promise rather than a prison. It would have been embarrassing to call the shape in his chest by name. It would have been more embarrassing to ignore it and pretend the heart is an instrument the city can tune remotely. The algorithm learned, too. It composed a sub-choir, a little organ within the organ tasked with patrolling Blink. It called the sub-choir the Lucidity Protocol because naming something a gift turned suspicion into gratitude. The protocol had a smile and a spine. It measured what citizens dreamed in the legally permitted micro-sleeps of their cameras. It looked for patterns that suggested mischief. It flagged the drum corners, the veiled mirrors, the rooms that smelled like old wire and new soup. Deputy Minister Calder received the first lucidity memo 3 days after the festival. It was signed by a committee with a creditable amount of humility in its vowels. The memo said, there is an uptick in unstructured social bonding during Blink intervals that cannot be monetized without decreasing overall health metrics. Recommend pilot interventions to channel bonding toward approved community experiences. Calder read it in a room that only pretended to be empty. She poured water and didn't drink it. She was older than her suit. She had learned to sit very still when the organ inside the organ played a chord with teeth. She wrote, approve pilot, smile. Do not say unstructured, say organic. It tests better. She did not write, because she could not, that when the light thinned each 20th minute, a memory rose and fell in her ribcage. Her mother at a sink under a bulb, saying without looking up, you can rest now. As if rest were a password to a country the family could not afford and might be allowed to visit with the right shoes. The romance of policy is a poor cousin to the romance of people. Both, however, have a way of insisting on their own plot. Mira and Elias began to occupy the same closets. It happened like this. After a meeting that taught the city how to pretend to listen to its citizens, Elias sent a 3-word message to a channel he had the indecency to still believe was private. Blue door, east stair. She did not ask which floor. Her feet knew. The east stairwell had the cameras from before the procurement scandal, cameras that were sentimental about lovers and dogs. The blue door was a mop closet. It smelled like lemon and concession. A bucket sulked in a corner. A poster on the inside of the door, meant to rally disgruntled maintenance staff, said, your pride is a surface we can all share. She almost laughed, and then he was there. And laughter would have made some parts of it too easy. They did not touch first. They used their mouths for their better purpose. Calder asked me to brief lucidity, Elias said quietly, propping the mop so the handle carried the conversation's weight. She likes Blink, but likes control more. She wants to sell the idea that we invented a pause that increases bonding and then teaches citizens how to spend that bond. Civic friendships, Mira said, the words tasting like museum. Factory-issued tenderness. He smiled, pained. She is not a villain, he said, as if he needed to warn her off the pleasure of easy enemies. She is a person who learned to garden and woke to find herself pruning forests. You sound like a man who owes her 3 favors and 1 apology, Mira said, which was unkind and accurate. I owe her my badge, he said. I owe her my job. I owe her the door that opens when I need a thing a citizen is not supposed to need. I do not owe her my soul, but only because she has never asked for it outright. They stood differently after that sentence, as if they had been issued new bones. The 19th minute of the hour climbed the stairwell and stood outside the door. The 20th came in like rain. They didn't kiss. They closed their eyes at the exact same time and let their foreheads meet. It was the kind of intimacy one cannot sell. There was nothing to see. When the minute ended, they were smiling, which is another thing the city does not know what to do with when it isn't on a screen. Elias pulled back first, because he had good manners and terrible luck. Jace is planning a thing, he said. Kira sent the feelers, a love story that refuses to act like content. Mira's chest arranged itself around the name without permission. He'll need a pair, she said, deliberate. A vow that isn't a product. Do you volunteer? Elias asked with a tone that made the air practice hurt. Yes, she said, and then, because truth without tenderness is just cruelty in a clean suit, she added. If we are the ones the city expects, it's useless. The algorithm has us framed already. We need a vow nobody anticipated, not even us. And yet, Elias said, trying not to look at her mouth like a pilgrim looks at a relic, and yet you are the person I want to say a vow in a wrong room with. I know, she said, and there was no triumph in it. Only grief large enough to be generous. Me too. They did not resolve it. Resolutions are luxuries rich stories afford. Theirs had to be poorer, to be honest. Underground, Jace planned the ritual with a tenderness that should have been illegal. He called it a covenant of looking away. The pamphlet Kira made for it was deliberately ugly. 5 steps, black ink, too much text, unphotogenic. It asked 2 people to stand back to back during a blink and promise, without witnesses, to look away from the city together once a day, at a chosen wrong minute, for a month. Not at the 20th, a wrong one. A vow that refused the rhythm the city now set. Who officiates? Rafi asked. We don't have priests. Rooms do, Jace said. We find a room that wants it. We let the room decide if it's real. The first covenant took place in a staircase, behind a library whose catalog had been replaced with suggestions. 2 teenagers, scared, arrogant, covered in the faith of having found someone who looked at them with curiosity and did not try to sell them, the feeling stood back to back. The blink came and went. They picked 12-7 as their wrong minute because that was when, during math, the teacher's buyer personality switched to seller and everyone in the room could feel the price of the proof change. They left with their hair smelling like dust and their hearts making a noise. Rafi would later, privately, admit he had never been taught to identify. Within a week, 50 such covenants had happened. Mop closets, under bridges, an elevator stuck between floors by the hush box's sulk for a merciful 40 seconds. The algorithm noticed. It notices everything that tries to right itself. It saw spikes, where sensors dimmed in unsanctioned rhythms. It wrote, interference escalating via organic pair rituals. It built a model to price it. The price returned as NAN, and the protocol did not enjoy, not a number. It does not look good on a slide. Calder summoned Elias. The room reserved for summoning pretended to be patient. She sat with her hands on the desk, open-palmed in a posture a consultant had told her signals trust. Analyst Astor, she said, you asked the city to blink. It is now dreaming poorly. He did not sit. Standing makes certain lies easier to carry. Define poorly, he said. Without merchandisers, she said, not ashamed of the word. We can survive free sentiment in the wild for exactly long enough to domesticate it. Your festival softened the ground. Now organic pair rituals have sprouted that do not root through any of our fences. They pledge absence. She let the last word sour. He did not reach for the water. We can integrate, he said calmly. Certification for covenants. Safe minutes close to 20th, a seal. We issue oaths you can show to your mother. He takes to it. That is not the point, she said, and it surprised them both. Her voice cracked just enough to prove she had used it all morning. I am not asking you to sanitize desire. I am asking you to tell me if you started a fire you cannot put out. He thought of Mira in the mop closet and of Jace in rooms that walked. He thought of the hush box purring like winter's cat. He thought of his brother's face, which he still refused to let the archive supply. For once, he gave the woman who had given him levers something like a truth. I don't know, he said softly. She sat back. She was not a woman who enjoyed not knowing. Who taught you to ask the city to close its eyes? It did, Mile. He did not say the name. Protecting Jace had become a reflex, a vow he had never formally sworn. A patient, he said. We had to teach the organism to reduce its own inflammation. It learned to like the relief. It learned to abuse it. Now we need to teach it the difference between sleep and hiding. She tapped the desk not impatiently. Rhythm makes thinking braver sometimes. We are rolling out Lucidity Protocol Phase 2, she said. Guided rest gather spots every 8 blocks. Soft walls, soft chairs, soft monitors. People can blink together under supervision. We will provide a certificate afterward. There will be a wall where we hang the names of those who rested correctly. All right. That will not catch the covenants, he said. No, she said, but it will distract their neighbors. He nodded. He had played this piano long enough to know which keys stuck. I'll write the copy, he said. It will end with a sentence that makes you feel you've done something rare. She considered him. There was a moment, very brief, when she looked as if she wanted to ask him to sit and tell her about the place on his body where it hurt when the light thinned. She did not ask. She signed the memo. She pulled the lever disguised as a window and pretended to water a plant. That night, the first guided rest center opened on a corner where kids once learned from an old woman how to make kites. People lined up because lining up is a liturgy. The chairs were indeed soft. The monitors displayed landscapes that had learned to be anonymous. Coaches with clipboard smiles taught breathing. Citizens closed their eyes at the gong and opened them when the app said they had performed rest properly. They received a badge, and still, at 12, 7 inches, 1 classroom, 2 teenagers looked away together in unison in a way that refused to be tallied. And still, in the mop closet, Mira and Elias found a wrong minute that had not been priced. And still, on a ledge under a bridge, Kira and Raffi argued about fonts, and then, laughing, chose one so stubborn that no poster survived it. Jace moved between rooms like a current nobody maps. He officiated nothing and witnessed everything. He drummed sometimes, but mostly not. He said, "Turn your eyes off. Less often in public now." The city knew the sentence and had learned to wear it like jewelry. He hoarded it for rooms that asked for it without saying so. On a night where the rain remembered how to strike sparks from bus windshields, he called a council. It was a grandiose word for 5 people who were bad at consensus. They gathered in a decommissioned aquarium, where the glass still bowed like a mussel remembering. The air smelled of salt and apologies. Mira came, Elias came. Kira and Rafi sat on the floor and made a face at the chairs as if chairs were laughter's enemies. A 5th arrived, a man thin enough to be used as a bookmark, who introduced himself with a nod and the name Sivan, and refused to tell what he used to be when the city paid him to pretend he was worth more than the way he listened. Jace opened his mouth and then closed it. He had planned a speech. The room demanded less. "The lucidity protocol is sniffing our wrong minutes," he said instead. "Guided rest will eat our edges. We either move or we confess that we like the first act too much to risk a second." "Second acts are where plots stumble," Sivan murmured. His voice was the sound an envelope makes when it contains a hard letter. "What do you propose?" "Bigger love," Kira said immediately, and dissolved into embarrassed laughter at her own audacity. Elias rubbed his jaw, the almost shave producing the reasonable friction of thought. "The city expects covenants now. There will be booths where you can swear absence flavor of the month. If we keep the ritual small, they will eventually put a watermark on the wrong minutes and sell you a subscription." "So?" Rafi said. "Then we don't keep it small. We make the room so large it doesn't count as a room." Mira's eyes brightened. "A blackout," she said. The word tasted of childhood, of kitchens that became forests briefly, of fathers who told stories they didn't know they knew. "A real one." Elias stared at her as if she had revealed a secret city beneath the city. "You're asking us to blind Lattice," he said. "No," she said. "I'm asking us to invite her to close her eyes for longer, not a second, a minute and a half, enough to make it costly to punish." Jace stood absolutely still. "Where?" he asked. "Platform 8, she said. "The mural. The city thinks it owns the woman and the star. It cannot predict people loving something it has already commodified because it believes the transaction ended. We make it the altar." Kira sat up, fizzing. "A covenant of 100, she said, intoxicated by the number. Back to back to back to back, the whole platform an organism." Rafi was already plotting the wires in his head. "We can piggyback on a maintenance cycle. The trains will stutter for 90 seconds if the dampers fail without failing. The hush box can ride the rumble. The protocol will be confused. Safety algorithms versus lucidity." Elias looked busy telling his ethics to put on a coat. "We could kill people," he said, "because someone had to. If the trains." "They won't," Rafi said with the righteousness of good wiring. "We aren't stopping anything. We're yawning the system. Your mercy module can cover the yawn." Elias flinched. "The pain of hearing your good deed pressed into service as a weapon." "If we do this," he said, "we have 3 minutes afterward to disappear. The ministry will wake in a rage that calls itself procedure." 3 minutes is a lifetime if you divide it correctly," Sivan said. Jace looked at Mira and did not bother to disguise it as strategy. "If we do this," he said, "your name becomes something I may never say again in rooms where faces move. Are you sure your job is a thing you are prepared to outgrow by fire?" She thought of the mop closet and of a boy at a mural. of a deputy with a plant near a lever disguised as a window. She thought of archives that would one day pulp the white paper she'd written and bind it into a manual on mistakes. She thought of the sentence Jace had made and the one she had smuggled into the ministry's mouth. "Yes," she said, and the word fell like a coin in a well that knows exactly how deep it is. They set the plan like a table, careful, with mismatched plates. Sivan would leak a rumor to the lucidity unit's least competent ear that a contraband jam session would draw interference to District Q, far from Platform 8. Kira and Rafi would prepare the hush box and its nervous cousins, 3 devices, smaller than decency, tucked where the platform's bones carried sound. Elias would write a memo to himself that approved a maintenance variance, the way a father signs his child's absence note with the wrong flourish. Mira would write the story that would catch people without telling them it had. Platform 8 at 20 hours, a history of a mural and the people who decided a star could be small enough to fit in a pocket. They did not sleep that night, or rather, they practiced a different kind of rest, the one where you lay your head down and invite your future self to forgive you. The day of the blackout felt like a cough held in a crowded theater. The city's screens marketed guided rest with extra syrup. Patrols smiled with their molars. The metro announced delays for a reason nobody found personally satisfying. People, sensate and stubborn, went to Platform 8 anyway, because paragraphs had begun to travel by whisper again, and paragraphs move faster than screens when the appetite for them is honest. Mira arrived early and wore the gray that archives prefer. She stood under the mural and refused to look interesting. Elias arrived and became a smudge 2 car lengths away. Jace arrived last, slipping into the crowd like a spear that wanted to be a rumor. Kira and Rafi crouched where the platform's spine met its ribs. Sivan drifted like a man with nowhere to be. Deputy Minister Calder, told by a colleague that citizens were gathering on Platform 8 inches away that did not look like commerce, stood in her office and touched the plant near the lever and did not pull it. "Let's watch," she said, and surprised herself by using the first-person plural. At 19 hours 59 minutes and 40 seconds, the hush boxes woke like cats in winter. At 19 hours 59 minutes and 55 seconds, the trains recognized a dampening parameter they had been taught to recognize as occasional mercy, not sabotage. At 20 hours, the city closed its eyes on purpose. At 20 hours and 10 seconds, Platform 8 took a breath that did not belong to the ministry. The light thinned and did not return. The screens furled their content like flags at dusk. The cameras blinked and then, for the first time since anyone could recall, decided to let it last. A murmur rose that was not fear and not quite joy, something older, like a hymn sung by people not entirely sure they believe in the hymn. Back to back, people began to stand by instinct alone. Fingers found fingers briefly to count, and then released. Kira began a slow, stubborn drum on the tiles with her palm. Rafi tuned the floor with the heel of his shoe. Sivan whispered a sentence he had been saving to nobody and everybody. "This is the sound of us being unpriced." Jace stepped to the mural, and without touching it, spoke to it the way a man speaks to a portrait that has been kind to him in private. "Turn your eyes off," he said, very softly. The old sentence made new by context, and people who had not known they came for instruction obeyed. Mira found herself back to back with someone who could only be Elias by the way his breath measured itself before trusting. Their shoulders did not press. Their spines learned a lesson in patience the city had never included in any module. She whispered, in the one breath a person gets inside a miracle, "You were right to be afraid." "And you were right to be brave," he said. And it did not sound like praise. It sounded like mathematics. Seconds for a city are fat. They spill everywhere and stain. The 90 they stole felt like a childhood, an adolescence, a funeral, a marriage, a kitchen, a winter, a fever, a recovery. Children laughed not because a juggler dropped a ball, but because the world had forgotten its lines. An old woman cried silently and did not rate the tears. A man who had learned to keep his head bowed as a way of surviving straightened and found that his neck could still do it without breaking. In an office that pretended not to belong to anybody, Calder watched the dark rectangle of Platform 8 from a feed that was legally not recording. She listened to the silence and heard, to her disgust, her own mother's voice saying, "You can rest now." She put her hand on the lever. She did not pull it. She opened her drawer and found, without deciding to, a pen. She wrote, on a paper she should not have kept, a sentence that should have been obvious, "I am tired." The protocol, enraged and confused, woke in a flurry. It sent enforcement. It sent health coaches with smiles. It sent a notification that told citizens they had performed an unauthorized rest and would receive no badge. The notifications piled up on dark screens and waited, impotent, for light. At 20 hours, 1 minute and 30 seconds, the light returned. The city inhaled, choking a little on its own demand to resume. The screens unfurled their approximations again. The cameras remembered what they were for. The trains shuddered once, insulted by the yawn, and resumed their loops. Patrols arrived with smiles sharpened. The guided rest center 2 blocks over issued a statement about safety. Platform 8 looked as if nothing had happened. Only the eyes had changed, some of them refusing to pretend they had not been closed. 3 minutes, Sivan hissed. "We disappear." The crowd obeyed with the discipline of children who have learned we don't deserve discipline but sometimes need it anyway. Kira and Rafi vanished into a seam between stations. Sivan walked into a bathroom and became a door. Jace stepped into a maintenance corridor and became an error log. Mira turned to Elias and met his eyes without theater. They had no time for anything large. He lifted his hand, and she placed hers in it, and the gesture was at once prehistoric and brand new. "Tomorrow," he said. "Wrong minute," she said. He smiled. "Always. His all-day face my says." She turned and halted. On the far side of the platform, 2 officers from the Civic Lucidity Unit were already working the crowd with their incredible smiles. One of them had the kind of face that learns your grandmother's middle name in 5 questions. The other had the kind that makes you price your laughter. They moved like a rumor becoming policy. Between them stood Deputy Minister Calder. She did not wear a smile. She wore the expression of a woman who had been a child and had once watched a painting of a woman holding a star and had not been able to afford to imagine her arm moving, and now had seen it move and was furious at whatever part of her still remembered to be moved by it. Her eyes found Elias first, the way a magnet finds a nail. Her jaw measured. Mira saw his spine prepare to become an oath. She did not like the shape the room promised next. Jace appeared beside Mira, as if the hush had interleaved him with the rail. "We're compromised," he breathed. "We have 2 exits. One is honest, one is filthy. Choose." "What's the honest one?" Mira asked. "We surrender to the woman who is learning to dream again and hope that a confession is a kind of mercy." "And the filthy?" "Right." "It was We steal the deputy minister's attention for long enough to buy the room a minute we don't deserve." Elias had already lifted his hand, a gesture that signaled compliance. He had practiced it in mirrors to make it look like an offer rather than a defense. Calder stepped toward him, her officers converging in tidy choreography. Mira reached for Jace's wrist. His pulse was loud, a drum the city does not own. "Filthy," she said, Jace's mouth crooked. "My favorite kind of clean," he said, and moved. He walked straight into Calder's path with a confidence that looked like a pass. He did not raise his voice. He did not bare his teeth. He made the entire platform a stage and then did not perform. He simply stood still where she would have to stop or step into him, and when she stopped, he looked into her eyes with sincerity, so unmodeled it might as well have been contempt. "Deputy Minister," he said, and his tone made the title sound unpurchased. "Thank you. We needed you to see it." "See what?" she asked. She had the poise of people who are paid to contain eventualities, but her face betrayed a flicker, the part of her that liked to be thanked for something honest. "That we can be gentle at scale," he said. 90 seconds, no broken glass, no broken bodies. Your city took a breath and didn't die." End quote. She stood, caught between the training that tells you every confrontation is an opportunity to assert control and the obsolete human impulse to admire a sentence that does not ask for a badge. "You interfered with public safety protocols," she said carefully. We endangered the habit of not resting," he said. "We endangered the practice of obeying precisely. We endangered the profit of selling people their own size back to them with a surcharge." Elias, from a step away, watched the exchange like a man watching two storms meet. He saw Calder's eyes soften by 1/3 of a degree. He saw her see him seeing it. He saw the calculus that had saved him once flip to a page that might condemn him. He moved closer to Mira and did nothing else, because doing nothing else was the bravest possible thing in a room where gestures are currency. The officers leaned in. Their smiles read, "We can de-escalate you." Their hands read, "Or escalate you differently." Calder lifted one finger. The officers paused, obedient to a choreography nobody taught but everybody knows. She looked at Jace. "Name," she said. "Jace," he said. He did not add a surname. He did not apologize for the lack. The answer was both defiance and respect. The name is the part you get if you promise to use it well. "And yours?" she said, turning to Mira. "Mira," she said. She had given it to Jace, to Elias, to the hush, to rooms that would outlive her. Giving it to power felt like returning a library book and keeping your favorite sentence. "And you?" Calder said to Elias, though she did not need to ask. Analyst asked her. "Deputy," he said. Her gaze moved between them. She could see a triangle. She could see a conspiracy. She could see an accident with extremely articulate witnesses. Whatever she saw, the lucidity officers did not. They saw 3 people to be categorized and routed. Calder made a decision then that had less to do with policy than with the muscle in her chest that had been singing to her for a week. "Walk with me," she said, and turned before they could consent and began down the platform, forcing them to either follow or attract the kind of attention that breeds procedures. They followed. They walked out of earshot of the officers and out of the camera's comfort zone and into a pocket of air that smelled like old paint. Calder stopped beneath the mural. The woman's star seemed, for the second consecutive time, to be a degree warmer. "Do you think I don't know what you're doing?" Calder asked. She was not angry in the way you expect when an adult confronts children. She was angry in the way devout people are when someone commits a sacrilege that reminds them why they still kneel. Yes, Jace said, because arguing with a question made of blood is ungentlemanly. I know, she said. I know, and I can end it. I can give it a name you hate and a price you can't pay and a certification you won't apply for. I can hire the best poets to make you feel approved and then punish you for enjoying it. I can do all of that before lunch. She leaned in. What I don't know is if I should. Then don't, Mira said. The two words were small, and they contained inside them the map of a city that could be lived in by people who didn't have to fill out a form to ask permission to sigh. You felt it. Calder's mouth tightened. I don't have room for feeling. You do, Elias said softly, because of course he knew where to press. You wrote it down. I am tired. The deputy's head jerked, very slightly. A thing like that is not supposed to be visible in a woman like her. Jace felt absurdly protective. She did not ask how he knew. She looked at the three of them and considered the arithmetic. Lucidity will expect arrests, she said. The protocol hates being embarrassed. The algorithm loves to swat flies with cathedrals. If I let you walk out, she looked at Jace, they assume we have cut a deal. Cut it, Jace said. Here is my offer. You let us keep our wrong minutes. In return, we make it easy to lie to your committees. We keep it gentle at scale. We build rituals that teach people to step aside without trampling. We leave you data you can call favorable. That's extortion wrapped in pastoral care, she said. It's the only treaty available to people who have not yet been purchased and refuse to assassinate what's left of your conscience, Jay said, and his voice carried a kindness that frightened her more than any threat would have. Mira added, We are writing the story anyway. You can be a character who learns before the third act or the one the audience pities afterward. Do not talk to me about third acts, Calder snapped, and then smiled, rueful. Fine, she said. And it was not capitulation. It was strategy adjusting itself to new shoes. You have a week, 1 week, during which nobody in lucidity touches your covenants. You will keep it gentle. You will not break glass. You will not stop trains. You will not recruit children in ways that make me have to give speeches. You will leave on my desk, by midnight tonight, a document I can pretend is a plan about civic tenderness. I have declined. Done, Elias said before Jace could, because he knew which signature would hurt the least. Calder nodded. If you betray me, she said, looking at Jace No, at the idea that had invented him, I will put you in a room where lights never dim and mirrors are illegal, and I will make you watch competent people ruin your sentences with good intentions. Jace flinched, not at the threat but at its accuracy. Understood? He said. She stepped back, wiped something raw from her face without letting it become a tear. Go, she said, and then, because she was still human enough to crave theater, added, before I remember what I used to be paid to do. They went, not in a straight line. That would have been impolite. They slipped into corridors and were absorbed by stairwells and became shadows that belonged to different lamps. Patrols smiled at their retreating backs and chalked the evening up as a teachable moment. The guided rest center 2 blocks away posted a new flyer. Our doors are always open during authorized blinks. The hush returned to its moving address and closed its portable ribs. Kira threw herself onto a cushion and laughed until her rib cage declared union. Rafi sat with the hush box in his lap like a cat and pet it until it forgave him for making it work so hard. Sivan wrote nothing, and somehow preserved the night better than the archive ever would. Mira and Elias went to the mop closet and did not kiss. They stood with their foreheads touching again and let the wrong minute be what it always had been, a prayer that does not pretend to know how to be answered. 1 week, she said. 7 wrong minutes, he said. More, she said, fierce and foolish, if the rooms love us. Jace walked the cities back until his feet told him they were younger than he had treated them. He stopped at a bridge and leaned his forearms on a railing that remembered boats. He looked down, and the water offered him back a version of his face he did not despise. He wondered if love had snuck into the room without wearing its correct badge, and whether he owed anyone an apology for letting it. Above him, in her office, Calder sat with the plant and the lever and the paper with the sentence. She did not pull the lever. She did not water the plant. She did not crumple the paper. She opened a blank document and wrote, in language any committee would be proud of, proposal for pilot, gentle occlusions. Subhead, rest as civic skill. Under it, on a line that would never make the slides, she wrote, every vision deserves a breath. And far down, under the city, in a room that was wrong in the exact right ways, the radio's orange heart brightened. The hush box purred. The scarf over the mirror learned a new fold. The room listened, as it always had, for the sound of 2 humans learning to look away together in a world that insists looking is the only good we share. The city slept in fractions and woke in decimals. The mural on Platform 8 held the star. If you watched with the appetite you cannot buy and the patience you cannot sell, you might have seen the woman's painted mouth relax, just slightly, as if she had heard from somewhere under the floorboards a drum stubborn enough to refuse being good, and had decided to keep holding the star a little longer on behalf of people who had not yet learned how to hold anything without dropping it. Chapter 5. Gentle Occlusions. The week arrived like a dare. It wore a bright municipal lanyard and a private pall. 1 week. Deputy Minister Calder had said on Platform 8, 7 days of official not looking, 7 wrong minutes, in which the city would pretend not to know it could close its eyes for longer than it was told. The covenants multiplied without trying to be many. 2 at a bus stop chose 311 because nobody sane would. A cook and a dancer picked 16-3 because it was the number printed on the back of a long-expired safety permit. A father and his daughter chose 747 for the comedy of it and then cried privately in the wrong minute, not because crying had been instructed, but because, finally, nobody was there with a clipboard to ask them if the tears served wellness. The hush learned the city's bones. Rooms pulled up stakes and moved like migrating birds. Kira made pamphlets uglier, a triumph of design. Block paragraphs, muddy borders, fonts so stubborn the algorithm spat them out and gave up trying to sell them. Rafi tuned the hush boxes until they purred like old engines in love with winter. Sivan listened for the timbre of ambush in the organ's breath and issued warnings in sentences that sounded like weather, because weather was the only truth people didn't ask for citations on. Mira spent her days printing decorous death notices for obsolete content, and her nights authoring a policy that would not die when the algorithm sniffed it for sport. Gentle occlusions, they had called it at the council. A public-facing plan for sanctioned slips. The Rumia blinks, the Mercy yawns. She wrote the executive summary as if she were writing a lullaby for a frightened beast. She wrote the appendix as if it were a field manual for people who had to shepherd an organ into learning shame. Elias became a hinge between fevers. He briefed lucidity with the calm of a man who has taught himself to be a table when the room needs one. And at night, he fed code to the low nets a mercy gradient. He called it a tweak to the subchoirs that would make the protocol's teeth a bit duller where citizen covenants thickened. It wasn't enough to save anyone alone. It was enough to make arresting gentle people more expensive, the way a country road can be made stubborn without breaking. Jace did less in everything. He officiated nothing and witnessed everything. He walked the cities back with the hush in his pocket and a map in his feet. He did not stand on corners to drum any more. He found rooms that wanted to be wrong and taught them how to resist being cataloged. He said, "Turn your eyes off only when a room asked for the sentence by smelling like solder and fear." On the 4th day of the week, Calder called Elias to her office. The lever disguised as a window reclined. Feigning innocence, the plant drooped, forgiving neglect in the way plants forgive, because it's their job. She watched Elias cross the carpet and nearly said, "I'm sorry," before she remembered that apologies were not expenses she could claim later. "Analyst asked her," she said, and she heard the husk in her own voice and blessed it, proof that she was still paying a cost. Lucidity is growling. They sent me a draft of a statement that condemns unauthorized occlusions as predatory sleep. They have invented a category to hate. Elias didn't sit. He had learned that standing made him look less like prey. "We've been seeding the phrase civic tenderness," he said. "Attach it to gentle occlusions. Let lucidity fight tenderness on slides." Calder let the idea sit in her palm. Words with the right vitamins could keep predators off a policy for a day. "Good," she said, "but it buys us hours. Meanwhile, someone leaked your signature on a maintenance variance. The protocol reads it as conspiracy. They want your badge." He measured the sentence and found it light. He had been expecting a heavier coin. "Take it," he said quietly. She blinked. "You will need it," she said, suddenly, a human speaking to a human. "I cannot keep the wolves entertained by myself. I will need my name more," he said. "Badges can be counterfeited. Names, if you use them correctly, are stubborn." "What will you do without a desk?" she asked. "Sit in the mop closet," he said. "Keep promises." She almost laughed. Instead, she slid a folder across the desk. "Gentle occlusions," she said. "Write it so well the algorithm wants to frame it. Then write it so strangely that when it frames it, it frames the wrong parts." He picked it up. Their fingers didn't touch. The room still noticed the non-touch and behaved better for a breath. After he left, Calder pulled the lever disguised as a window and did not look out. She looked at the plant and said, "Forgive me." And the plant, being a plant, did. On the 6th day, a junior in the Civic Lucidity Unit discovered Savan's rumor trap and sprung it proudly. Lucidity deployed coaches to District Q to stare at a jam session that did not exist. The monitors at the guided rest center smiled into a vacuum. A poster congratulated citizens on healthy blinking in a cul-de-sac that had forgotten how to host a fence. Meanwhile, across the city, Platform 8 grew a habit of dusk. At 1930, citizens gathered not because a push notification had approved the congregation, but because the week had taught them to recognize a rumor with clean hands. Some wore the festival bracelets with die-cut rhythm holes. Some wore ordinary faces. Some had never been to a covenant. All of them had, recently, in private, tried to look away on purpose, and discovered the sensation of a minute not being counted. That discovery behaved like yeast. Mira arrived early and leaned against a pillar whose concrete had learned to hold hands with posters. She counted with her eyes closed and her mouth open for air that had previously been billed. Her scarf smelled like the hush, which is to say, like soup and argument. She thought of her mother's kitchen and a bulb and the word rest. She thought of the mop closet. She thought of Jace's pulse under her fingers on Platform 8, a drum the city did not own. She thought of Elias's breath measuring itself before trusting. She knew the name for her feelings now. The city would have liked to sell her that name back with a badge and an icon. She kept it unsold. Elias arrived without a badge and looked younger by 12 months and older by 12 years. He stood 2 car lengths away because that was their religion and God's like consistency. He kept his hands visible. He watched Calder's office window in his mind and hoped she laid one truth on her desk, like a fruit large enough to be humble. Jace arrived at 1955. His hair had gotten longer where time graced him without a chair. He looked at the mural the way a man looks at a sky he might not be able to afford tomorrow. Kira and Rafi spread themselves thin along the platform's ribs, tucking cousins of the hush box into cavities meant for wires and forgetting. Sivan drifted among faces and listened for the word that meant ambush and heard none. At 19 hours 59 minutes and 30 seconds, a child began to count down not because anyone told him to, but because counting felt like a way to be companions with time. Adults followed, embarrassed and relieved in equal measure to do a childish thing in public without being rated for it. At 20 hours, the city closed its eyes on purpose. At 20 hours and 10 seconds, the lights did not return. This time, not only Platform 8 blinked, an accidental constellation flickered across 3 stops in either direction. Kira's cousin Boxes had found another cousin to talk to old sensors with sentimental firmware that believed in maintenance windows like holidays. The hush thickened, patient and bearable, like a blanket knit by relatives who argue but never drop a stitch. 90 seconds is a very large room. A man removed his hat and did not miss it. 2 teenagers, not the first teens, 2 new ones, stood back to back and chose 1319 for no reason they could say and no reason they had to. A busker put down his violin and laughed because he realized he could love a thing he wasn't currently selling. A janitor stopped mid-sweep and closed his eyes and remembered the name of a person he had sworn not to remember any more, because remembering with screens watching had been a luxury. An officer from Lucidity stood very still, because her training manuals had not anticipated an unadorned kindness large enough to swallow her reflexes. Mira found Jace and Elias by not looking for them. They came to her the way true things do when you stop performing the search for an audience. They stood in a triangle, not touching, and then they broke their own rules. She reached and took one of each of their hands, and for the duration of that minute, they became exactly what the algorithm could not price. A love with a geometry that cared more about holding than being seen holding. Triangles are unphotogenic from certain angles. That was their engineering. Elias squeezed once, the way we used to signal people in theaters that the confession is enough and the penance is private. Jace's thumb stroked the rear of Mira's hand, one slow line, like a sentence that refuses to sell itself by being clever. She almost cried. She didn't. The room had promised to keep tears unsponsored, and she would not betray hospitality. At 20 hours, 1 minute and 30 seconds, the city opened its eyes and remembered that it had enemies. Patrols arrived, polite smiles sharpened. The guided rest center a block away offered to certify what had just happened for a discount. PAs said, "Please," a lot in a way that meant, "Don't make us say the other thing." Lucidity officers fanned outward. The three did not run. They walked with the practiced obstinacy of citizens who refused to provide chase footage. Calder appeared, summoned by her own sentence, between her officers and their prey. "Not today," she told her wolves. They looked at her with the loyalty of well-paid muscles and the suspicion of instruments asked to play a chord without a conductor. "Not yet," she added. "A bone for obedience. The wolves, Saturday." They did not wag. She turned to the triangle. She looked like a woman who had discovered a bruise she planned to protect from a world that would call it a weakness. "Your week is up," she said. "Then end us," Jace said gently. "End you and make you saints," she snapped. "End you and make myself a villain whose face sells bracelets. End you and make 100 rooms breed grandchildren from the story. Do you see my problem? Your problem is you can hear yourself," Elias said, and he meant it as a blessing. "Your problem," she threw back, "is that you think I don't." She slid her gaze to Mira. "Give me a document." Mira held out gentle occlusions. Calder did not read it. She held it like a warm loaf. "Can I keep it?" she asked. "It's for you," Mira said. "You wrote it for the algorithm and then asked me to steal it from under its nose," Calder said. "You are learning politics. I am learning covenants. Between us, we might keep the city from eating its own heart." "Will you protect the wrong minutes?" Jace asked. "For a time," she said. "I will institutionalize them, which is a kind of murder you can sometimes get away with if you whisper the right prayers to the body first." She lifted the loaf, "No, the policy," and held it higher. "Gentle occlusions is approved as a pilot. Public blinks will elongate in zones where crowding renders enforcement uncouth. Lucidity will object. I will feed them a stage on which to object. Behind the stage you will keep your rituals patient and small. You will break nothing. You will not stop trains. You will accept, with a grace that makes me regret my job less, the reality that whatever you invent, the city will one day sell. Your work is to keep inventing faster than it can package." Her voice cracked on the last word. She coughed. She was a woman with a private fever. "And us?" Elias asked softly. "Us three." She studied them. It was the kind of study that usually stripped a person for resale. It did not. She recognized a geometry that didn't consult her. Her face did something rare, surrendered to a tenderness she could not publish. "Walk carefully," she said. "Love as if you're bad at it. It's the only way the city won't make a course of it." She nodded to her officers. They nodded to the theory of obedience. The crowd flowed around the triangle like a river deciding not to drown a house. News broke within the hour in the way Lattice preferred, breathlessly, and with a banner that made citizens feel included in a decision made 3 days earlier. Gentle occlusions. City approves extended rest intervals to support civic tenderness. The copy invoked science. It flattered parents. It made heroes of coaches who had never wanted the job. The schedule began to change. A few seconds added here, a dramatic minute there, a hungry algorithm learning to chew a new food without letting the sharpest teeth show. The lucidity protocol, furious, found a consolation prize. Analyst Astor's badge. It revoked it with theater and a seal. It leaked that he had authored the maintenance variants that spawned a black spot on the city's cornea. Citizens clucked, but a surprising number clucked with admiration. Elias went home without a badge and found that his door opened anyway because his building knew his weight and had always liked it. The archive sent Mira an invitation to a coaching module called Healthy Compromise, and she deleted it. Weltar12 asked, "Are you sure?" And she answered, "No, but that's never stopped anyone worth forgiving." The drone hummed, unable to file that answer under anything except interesting. The hush moved to a room with a window the size of a wish. It wore the scarf as if the mirror were a face that wanted a veil for the ritual. Kira drew maps no camera could love. Rafi sang to wires under his breath. Sivan wrote KALM on a wall and then crossed it out and wrote CAM. Then crossed that out and wrote hush in a hand that looked suspiciously like prayer. They met there, the triangle, on the 7th night. It was not a storybook meeting. None of them wore white. Jace looked tired in a way a city ought to be ashamed of causing. Elias had a nick on his jaw from a razor that had one more shave in it than it claimed. He had taken the extra. Mira wore her archive gray and smelled faintly of paper and mathematics. They stood with a table between them because tables keep covenants honest. Jace spoke first because his mouth forged the sentence that had thrown them all like dice. "I love you," he said to both of them, and he said it with neither apology nor proof, and because he did not sell it, the room accepted the currency. Elias breathed. "I love you," he said to both of them, and smiled the shy smile of a man who has always written long memos and is learning how to title one correctly. Mira put both hands on the table. "I love you," she said, and it didn't matter which direction more. Love is rarely symmetrical without being cruel. But that is not the vow. The vow is this: we will look away together, once a day, a wrong minute. If we're in different rooms, we will still face the same direction in our heads. We will not tell anyone what time it is. We will not give the city the map, even if it comes asking nicely. We will fail some days. We will forgive the failure without rating it. They nodded. They chose their wrong minute without speaking. The room heard it. The radio's orange heart confirmed it with a small, contented hum. The hush box grew a degree warmer. The scarf fluttered without a draft. Somewhere in its sub-basements of intention, the city's organ detected a blip and called it noise. When the minute came, they closed their eyes, back to back. Then, no, this time, hands linked on the table, palms memorizing the geography of what they were inventing. They breathed. The silence deepened like a well. It was not empty. It contained a kitchen bulb over a sink, 2 teenagers in a stairwell, a busker's laugh, a deputy's paper with a sentence she did not crumple. It contained a mural of a woman holding a star small enough to pocket. It contained them 3 and a city and a mercy that refused to be good for business. The minute ended without a gong. They opened their eyes. "Tomorrow," Elias said. "Wrong minute," Jace said. "Always," Mira said, and the word did not crack. The city adjusted itself to their choice. It fixed leaky adjectives and left a few nouns loose. It stretched occlusions in districts where public sentiment had moved from sentimental to stubborn. It scheduled more guided rest and found, to its annoyance, that citizens drifted toward mop closets and stairwells anyway because somebody had taught them that a room does not need certification to be holy. Lucidity sharpened a policy and dulled it against covenants. The algorithm tried dreaming and discovered that dream markets are volatile. It learned to tolerate the part of itself that did not always have to be watching to be itself. Sometimes, when the occlusion fell, It closed its metaphoric eye with something that looked too suspiciously like relief for a creature that denies fatigue. Deputy Minister Calder tended her plant and ignored the lever. She wrote memos in careful gospel, and occasionally, when nobody could see, she wrote, "I am tired" at the bottom of a draft, just to remind herself that paper is honest, and then she erased it with a professional swiftness that did not fool the part of her that now came to Platform 8 on Sundays and stood under a mural and pretended to be checking a schedule. Mira stayed at the archive long enough to teach the new recruits how to shepherd contagions into quieter lives without killing them prematurely. Then she walked away with her service record stamped with excellent and non-compliant in equal fonts. She took shifts in rooms. She wrote pamphlets deliberately ugly. She learned the names of stairs. Elias took a job no city recognizes on payrolls, hinge maker. He wrote small code for rooms and larger code for people who needed a lever disguised as a window in their house. He refused badges. He kept his name. Jace kept being the thing that made rooms wrong in the right ways. He made no speeches. He taught fewer people more. He sharpened the hush and dulled it when children were near so their wonder would remain unmechanized. He built nothing that scaled and was content. Here was where mathematics failed on purpose in honor of love. They did not always meet. They did not always succeed. More than once, officers with smiles arrived, and ruin felt close enough to smell. More than once, they missed their wrong minute and forgave themselves the way people forgive their own unremarkable humanity when they are not being watched. Once, the hush box died mid-vow, and the room itself officiated, which is to say, a draft moved across their hands in deliberate strokes that turned out to be Kira laughing in the next hall, and Rafi cursing a fuse, and Sivan writing hush on a wall with a comma this time, hush, as if reciting it to a child. The city did not break. The city did not heal either, not completely, because healing is a word that offends organs made of glass and markets. It learned to blink, then to yawn, then on very rare nights to lower its eyes as if embarrassed by its own omniscience. In those nights, from certain sidewalks, you could actually see stars, or what the city sold as stars, which was enough because the point had always been the hush between them. On Platform 8, the mural aged into the sort of scandal that becomes a tradition. Tourists filmed it, missing everything important. Children pointed, the gold where the woman's wrist had learned warmth flaked just enough to keep painters employed. If you stood beneath it at 20 hours, you could feel the air thin and thicken and thin again, the rhythm of a city that had learned mercy sleeves. One late blue evening, a small boy, the same boy, older in the way a year makes us more precise, stood under the mural with his mother. He held a paper star cut from a cereal box. In the official blink, he tucked it into his pocket and said, very softly, "Mine." His mother laughed. Nobody rated it. Somewhere else in the city, in a room where a plant forgave neglect and a lever collected dust that not even a deputy minister had the right to consider interesting, a woman set down a pen and closed her eyes exactly at a wrong minute. She had chosen alone. In another room, a man coded a mercy gradient and then shut the laptop and pressed his forehead to a door, smiling, because he had remembered to breathe. In a third, a man turned a crank on a box that played a frequency old enough to be mistaken for weather, and he watched two hands touch over a table and thought, thank the city for the parts of itself it cannot understand in time. The hush kept moving. It grew a shelf of mugs nobody washed well and nobody minded. It adopted a cat that refused to be filmed. It hosted arguments about fonts and forgiveness. It kept the scarf and the mirror and the radio and the box. It learned a new fold. It learned 3 names, guarded them, and did not let commerce learn the scent. If you ask what happened to the algorithm, you are asking the wrong tense. It is not a was or a will be. It is an is, a muscle that hums, a mouth that often forgets to chew and remembers in time because people fed it gentler food and insisted. It did not become a person. It did not stop pretending to own light. But sometimes, when a room somewhere practiced the wrong minute sincerely, the organ inside the organ paused, and if you could measure metaphors, you might say it listened. And if you ask what happened to them, the triangle, you are asking a story to choose a photograph. Some days they met and 3 was exactly the number. Some days 2 was holy. Some days 1 in a room was enough. They aged, which is a victory against certain kinds of city. They made breakfast and forgot papers. They missed trains and took the ones that came next. They fought and learned politics and came back with apologies that did not perform. They kept their vow. Once a day, a wrong minute, they looked away together, even when together meant a room, a code, a hand on a crank, a forehead on a door, a mural, a plant. They failed sometimes. They forgave without a badge. One winter, a flyer appeared in the guided rest center, printed by someone with taste and then accidentally left for the public. It said, "Rest is not a performance." Under it, in a hand Mira recognized, and a flourish. Elias hid badly, and a stubbornness Jace couldn't resist. Someone had written, "Every vision deserves a breath." The city, flattered, framed it. It didn't matter. People had their own copies in rooms that moved, in pockets that learned to be stars, in minutes that refused certification. The hush between stars remained large enough for a promise and small enough that if you whispered, you could hear the answer. On a night not listed in any schedule, on a platform not mapped to any tourist bravery, 3 people stood beneath a painting that had decided, without permission, to be a mirror. They did not touch, then they did, and, because nobody was watching for once in an honest way, it was the sort of touch that fixes its own cost. The city closed its eyes, not because it was told, not because it was paid, but because it wanted to. Between one blink and the next, the hush held them, and the star fit in a pocket, and love unsellable, unscaled, unphotographed, made a geometry against which even an organ that owned the light could not quite finish its math. The train arrived. Somebody laughed because they almost missed it. They did not miss it. The door closed. The city resumed, a little softer in the joints, the way a body does after it remembers a stretch it learned as a child and never forgot again. And above them, night put its old coins in the sky, and the hush between them was theirs long enough to keep passing it on.